Rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk call the roll.
Councilman Ford.
Here.
Councilman Tremont.
Here.
Councilman Bastian.
Here.
Vice Mayor Siltner.
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. All present and accounted for. We have a quorum, which brings us to discussion item number 4. Yellowstone Landscape Southeast LLC reports.
Mayor, Council, this is Barry Critcher from Yellowstone, and this is in response to the request for occasional, we decided quarterly reports from then on how things are going for Yellowstone.
Dead and frozen.
Yes, dead and frozen, that's good. We like cool weather for sure.
No, you don't like cold weather.
So I'm Barry Critcher with Yellowstone Landscape, and this is Steve Sturgick. Steve is the guy that's on site every day, looking over everything and making sure everything's going the way it's supposed to. But first and foremost, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're excited about partnering with the city. We're going on 2 years, and we hope that the relationship continues. It's in our mind, it's been positive. We've worked with a lot of different folks, and it's all been good experiences. We've worked together very well with all the staff here. Always a lot of challenges, but we feel like we've overcome most of those. Made a significant investment when we took over this property, this project, working for the city. Somewhere close to $150,000 in capital outlay with trucks and equipment. We're about to buy some new mowers to keep things going. The 2-cycle stuff just, you just blow through that, edger blades, mowers, and all that kind of stuff. But really, we feel like that things are very consistent. Some of the things that we do is we show up every day. You guys don't have to worry about whether or not we're going to be here, who showed up, who hasn't showed up. Been through 2 hurricanes in less than a year. That's challenging, as you guys know. The debris that's left behind, getting people to come to work, it's just it's unbelievable. So I tell people all the time that you guys leave and you want us to be there the next day to have your property cleaned up, but our folks like to leave too. But we've been here, we've been consistent. Some of the challenges we have are some of the citizens of the community feel like that we're part of Waste Pro or the garbage pickup, so they throw their debris over the fence and they ask for us to pick it up. So, but it's part of what we do. So
Throw it back up.
Anyway, get a lot of compliments from the residents, especially on the ponds, the part we just took over. And felt like it's a pretty seamless process. So always going to be challenges with landscaping. It's moving, it's breathing, it's alive, it's dead, it's that. And just one thing I'd point out that I thought was interesting, I had Steve the other day, I said, how far is it from 95 to US 1 on Dunlawton? So it's 3.5 miles. So we edge on Thursdays, 3.5 miles one side of the sidewalk, 3.5 miles the other side of the sidewalk, the curbs, the medians, and the other side. So we do all that safely. We don't have any incidences. It's very dangerous work, working on Dunlawton. People blowing by or talking on their phones. And it's not you, huh? So anyway, we're proud of our track record as far as safety goes, and no incidences and things like that. So, but it's a lot. Guys are walking a lot. We do experience turnover. Our crew leaders haven't changed since we started the job, but as far as laborers go, when you tell them they got to walk 20-something miles with a stick edger in their hand, and it's 98 degrees, then they last for a couple weeks. But anyway, we try to minimize turnover. Very good to our employees. 401k, health benefits, safety's at the head of everything we do. I mean, when you work along the roads like we do on all the right-of-ways, it's worry about our guys all the time because it's so dangerous out there. So with that being said, I'll open it up for questions and comments.
Very good. Scott, why don't you start?
Well, I actually kind of thought there was going to be a staff component to this as well. So I don't know why I thought that, because I know that to try to address some of the issues we were having, Jake had, or Public Works Director had assigned a direct liaison and someone who was going behind inspecting and all that. And I guess I was kind of looking to see how that was going from their perspective, because we don't see those reports.
That's going well. The contract calls for things to be identified, and when they are, they have 24 hours to respond. In all cases, Yellowstone has responded to date. We haven't. The contract, similar to our solid waste contract, has a fine provision in it, and they have yet to be fined for anything. So, as far as the contract, they've met the provisions of the contract, and Barry and I communicate often when the list of things that are demanding their attention within 24 hours gets to a point. I usually get a phone call, and Barry actually calls me before I call him, and we do a drive about, take a look at some of the problem areas. There are some areas that we call gray areas. Areas that aren't on the contract that I call them gray areas. Barry calls them I'm doing this for you, but areas that aren't in the contract that they're taking care of,
value added,
that our people aren't, and it's working to the benefit of the city. So I do appreciate that piece, and it makes it easier to kind of work with them on the things that get missed. On the things that do get missed, I'm sure Steve's the one that's out there doing it, but we usually see their crew back out there. Like on Dunlawton during the high traffic season, it's Thursdays. I don't know if it's still Thursdays.
Right. Yep.
But if we call like before noon on a Thursday, even before they're done, they're usually back in that trouble spot, if not first thing Friday morning. So on the complaint response, they're doing a great job, and on the let's not make it a complaint in the first place, they're working hard to minimize that. I think last time Barry and I talked, the turnover sometimes gets them behind, but they roll back around, and the foreman or somebody takes care of it. So we've been pleased with the relationship, and they are meeting their contractual responsibilities.
And if I could just add to that just a little bit, I'm sorry, but that's our whole thing. It's relationship, and it's output. It's results driven. So last year, for example, we mowed Dunlawton 43 times. Contractually, 39 is all we're supposed to do. We had a warm winter, so we had to mow. We didn't charge the city anymore. That's not what it's all about to us. It's about relationship. So there might be a time that you don't need to go somewhere and mow that time. So for us, it's about relationships. It's about, hey, we are going to make mistakes. I can promise you that we will make mistakes, but we will fix them right away. So
I just want to make sure that we have created better communication lines for you guys, and vice versa. And so I can appreciate the efforts that Jake and his staff have gone through to try to clean that up a little bit, and as best we can for future contracts and moving forward, those gray areas that you guys are identifying, I'd like to see us try to make those more black and white, so that the communication and the evaluation of that stuff is going to be easier for both sides. It is what it is, right? I mean,
right.
Once we understand what we're all trying to accomplish, then we got to make the language match what we're looking for. My only concern really, honestly, is, and I know it's been a tough year, like you said, 2 hurricanes in 13 months and a lot of wet weather, but the weeding seems to get behind at times. The crack stuff as well. Those would be my biggest thing. I mean, I know when you're folks are out there mowing, in past we've had issues, not necessarily with Yellowstone, but other contractors where they blow everything into the street. And I think that's a lot of times that's a product of new employees and retraining them, and don't do that, blow it back up here and stuff like that. I get it. I totally get it. I understand. So yeah, I'm glad that you guys are working those communication issues out with the city staff, and I would encourage you that as you identify any of those frustrations or those gray areas that you guys feel like, hey, this needs to be clarified, let's do it together. You know what I'm saying? Let's make that better moving forward, because we are making some reinvestments in our our high visibility roadways, which I guess can be high liability, but our high visibility roadways. And
Just hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, as we make those investments, you know, we're going to be looking for those high quality service levels to be able to maintain that stuff and keep that look and protect it as much as possible. And I get we can't do anything about 25-degree nights and
Right.
frostbite and all that kind of stuff, but
Right.
where we can, we want to make every effort to do that.
You
So-
bring up another point as an aside, and I see it, landscapers or people just maintaining their yards, both business and commercial, and they blow their debris out into the road, which, are you doing that to make things look better? Because it certainly doesn't. And when that debris gets into the storm drain, these are probably going to be the same people who complain when the storm drains don't work the way they're supposed to. And it's not legal to do that. So, I mean, I think that is certainly a point of emphasis, certainly for all of us, whether it be code enforcement and the like, Jake. When we see commercial landscapers blowing debris out into the road, knowing what that does to our drainage system, we want it there. We want it to work. Absolutely.
Okay.
Barry, also, I'm going to ask you to kind of chime in on something. I hate to put you on the spot,
Okay.
but you're good at that, so
Okay.
I'm going to. One thing, that you don't have to give a full answer on this tonight, but if you could give us a little feedback. We've had a little discussion about adding some trees and some groups that maybe want to do some tree planting and stuff like that throughout the city and around retention areas or one of those areas. And so I would just ask you to be thinking on how you can give us some recommendations. We don't want to complicate the ability to service
Okay.
the retention areas
Okay.
by doing that. But if there are opportunities to do that without doing that, I'd like to get some feedback from you on that, and for Jake's staff is helping to identify areas like, hey, look, if you've got a group that's looking to plant 30 trees, this would be a good spot versus, you know, putting them up on top of the retention areas all the way around, and now we just created, you know, another 30 hours of trimming and edging and stuff like that, because I don't think that would be our intent. So
Right.
just kind of keep that in the back of your mind and
Okay.
be thinking on that a little bit as you and your crews are out and about and you see these. And some places may be better for that than others.
Right.
Sure.
So if you kind
The ponds in particular you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll tell you what, Vice Mayor, we can probably invite Barry to the next EAB.
Sure.
The new chair, Mr. Macaluso, is open to stuff like that. So if you have time, they're up there now. I'm not going to send
Okay.
you up to the second floor, but
Get up there and
Run.
yeah, but if you hurry, but we'll get them up there and as a guest speaker and kind of
That's a great
let them know what they
suggestion.
found.
We'd be happy to do that. And if I can just drop back 2 years, you know, the city's been evolving and the leadership's been evolving. And from when we started with Mitch and Chris, you know, they were doing a lot of stuff in-house, and it has been great working with everybody. It's like, Mitch and Chris, y'all need to take care of this, or Yellowstone, you need to do that. And we kept evolving. The communication has gotten better. We're dialing things in. Christine is on her game. Her and Steve talk probably way too much. But it's very consistent. Before it's like, let's just get it done, because you guys were doing some stuff in-house. You had some people maybe that had backed out on you. So it's been pretty seamless, really. And I mean, the whole staff, everybody we've worked with has been great. And yeah, there's always going to be gray areas. You get it as dialed in black and white as you can, but you know, like on Dunlop, some of those people want to take care of their own. Some want you to do it. So you just ebb and flow, and we're always here to
Figure it out.
work with you guys, never against you. So
Gotcha. Sure, you got anything?
Not really. I hate to drag it out. I mean, you guys covered some points. I'm glad to see that, you know, from the staff side, you're responsive to what's going on and you're handling things. And Scott touched on the biggest thing for me is the weeds. And it's summertime, you know, 99% of the time, because they grow quick. We get a lot of rain. They're 2 feet tall before you know it, and they're sticking out of, you know, the crack in the concrete median or whatever. So that's the biggest thing for me. And you know, you're not mowing down there, so you probably don't see it all the time. But what, you know, when
I
they're
think
there,
that might have been one of those gray areas too. Was it? Steve, there?
probably.
Yeah.
A lot of there's a lot of areas that have weeds growing that aren't under our maintenance.
Oh, okay.
The city used to have a guy that rode around on a four-wheeler
Okay.
and sprayed all those different
Yeah.
crack weeds in those areas, and I think he retired or something like that, and I don't know if they replaced him. So those kind of things
It's me, I just haven't been out there.
Yeah. But there is a weed component to the contract
Yeah.
where the
Yeah,
obvious
about
stuff are,
figures.
you got a certain schedule where you're pulling them, and then
Right,
you
right.
if somebody sees something, then you respond to the issue. Okay,
Right,
yeah.
you know, the water department has weeds growing up the side of the building or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, you may miss our weed sprayer. I've never seen a Porsche pulling a
Yeah.
sprayer, but
It's amazing.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It goes by real
I
fast.
don't like it.
garbage on the side of the road, I'll tell you
At least
that.
blows it away.
No, I can make a general sense. The city is looking much better. It's really good to be there because we had a couple of rough years there. And I think a lot of diligence and some heavy struggle has really led to some improvements. And hopefully we'll even go further. Driving up here today, I looked and I saw something that was just shattering for me. For the last 10 years, I've watched these bushes at the corner of down by Dunlawton and US 1. There's a group of
Triangle.
bushes. The famous triangle. I have never seen them when they weren't covered with all sorts of vines and weeds and looking horrible. I looked. There's no weeds over. There's no vines. I mean, I was impressed. First time I've ever seen that. I almost went out there myself to clean them, but
They're stepping it up in the River District, Bob.
yeah, the River District is looking better. So,
Good, thank you.
Chase, what you got?
Oh, you know, not much. That's one of the things I don't get many complaints on. Before I sat in this chair, I did hear, you know, I listened to a lot of the complaints that were justifiably made for a couple of years. But you know, I think you guys are one of the reasons that the city is one of the prettiest cities in Central Florida. So again, that's not a thing I get complaints of from people. When I drive around, I'm always well pleased. So you know, keep up the good work and always strive to do better.
Thank you. Thank you.
St. Augustine. It bounces back. It's pretty hardy, but it bounces back from freeze pretty good, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
They have a special St. Augustine spray they put on it. Comes out.
it's green.
A lot of trash. You know, a lot of people think that the roadways are trash cans. So you guys pick it up. I know everybody does their part. So
Yeah, at my house, every morning I go out and pick up.
every morning, huh?
Yeah, every morning go pick up the trash. Someone likes vodka along there. Because you look at my, by the way.
I'm sorry, I'll stay out of the River District.
For Waste Pro, I'm not drinking all that.
What we've done in streetscapes over the years, and now we've added Ridgewood Avenue in the River District. Dunlawton certainly being our primary traffic corridor. You have got the most important job of any landscaper in any city keeping Dunlawton, because that has to be held to a higher standard, no doubt about it. And you know, I'm only asking for 110% when the most you can give is 100, but that's okay. You know, we strive for perfection. We'll complain about weeds when that's life. My thing is that when there are problems, we go fix them. We improve the process. We move on, and that's all I can ask of you guys. Joe, anything else?
I do have one question. So Dunlawton, is there some enhancements going on there? Are you guys getting ready to
Yes.
beef up that?
Yes.
It's gonna be.
That's
yeah.
approved and ready to roll?
It's 100% approved, gone out to bid. I think the contract may have been awarded. I'll have Margaret
Okay.
Tomlinson give you a brief of what's going in,
What's
when
going
it's
in.
going in, and what's going to happen.
Okay, gotcha.
That'll be something that Community Development and Public Works work together on. There's a lot of things happening heading south to north.
Okay,
So.
gotcha.
And we appreciate that. Now, the other thing is just appreciate your adaptability to new conditions and the like. So hopefully you can use us to showcase your wares to other cities.
Absolutely.
That's-
We love doing that, so.
Very good.
Awesome.
Appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Have a good night,
Have a
John.
good- yep.
Go get them.
That's it.
Item 5, fire assessment presentation.
Yep, please. So, Mayor, Council, this is Camille Tharp from GSG, Government Services Group. They traveled here to present the fire assessment brief. This is for us, the first, we had talked about it, this is the first official briefing and kind of get us kicked off and have that conversation. There'll be many more. This is just kind of information. GSG is one of the few people here in Florida that do a great job of letting you know the pros and cons of fire assessments and where we might want to go or not want to go in the future.
There was so much information in this PowerPoint, I almost thought Alan Rosen did it.
Don't worry, mine's next.
Yeah.
It happens to be the exact same number of pages, too. I don't know how you did that.
How about that?
We'll do the Reader's Digest presentation part of it, though. My name is
I
Camille
like you
Tharp,
already.
and I'm Senior Vice President of Government Services Group. I have Jeff Rackley with me. He's doing more of the fire assessment projects in the last 5 years. You should feel very, very privileged. I'm actually retired. And I'm on retainer now with my company. I still own part of the company, but I got a call from Ellen and decided I'm still dabbling a little bit, so I'm dabbling here because we actually did some work with Port Orange years ago, before all that stuff happened on the other side on 95, when Ken Parker was still here. So
He's still here.
Yeah.
It's just not in the chair.
So we're going to talk about, just give you a quick overview of GSG, just so you know who we are. The case law requirements, which are very important. It's where cities and counties can make mistakes in doing assessments. The 2 assessment methodologies that have been court approved. Collection options, you know, you have utilities, so you have some other options besides the tax bill collection method. The implementation steps, and then a bunch of information on strategies for success that probably won't mean a lot to you until you decide to go forward, because it's the ways that other cities and counties have gotten in trouble, or ways in which they've succeeded. GSG, we're headquartered in Tallahassee. We have offices in Longwood, Gainesville, and Cudjoe Key, down in the Keys. Although its office is kind of there right now, it's still getting refurbished from the hurricane. We've been in business over 25 years, over 20 years. I was with the company since inception. Like I said, I just retired in December, but I'm still doing a little bit of work. We really did, with Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson, help create the case law on fire assessments in the state of Florida. I've served as expert witness in court cases on fire assessments. And we're very proud of what we've done all over the state. Just a map of the different areas where we've worked. Now into the nitty-gritty. What is a fire assessment? The most important feature about assessments is that you have to distinguish them from ad valorem taxes, because you can't impose you can't impose taxes unless you've been given the authority by the Florida legislature. So a special assessment is not a tax, although people will feel like it's a tax because it's coming out of their pocket in the same way. But it is an assessment, and it's based on other things besides the value of property in some cases. And so what we've helped our clients do is find a way to meet the case law requirements of a special assessment. They are charges against property to pay for fire protection services. Now, the next little bullet there might concern you, because it says does not include EMS type services above first response. Okay, so what you're going to say right away is 85–90% of our calls are EMS. Well, we might as well not even do this, because why should we go through all this trouble for 5 or 10% of our budget? In cases where you are above fire first responder, where you're either a fire BLS or fire ALS or ALS with transport, the courts require us to artificially, not arbitrarily, artificially separate your budget between fire and EMS. We do that in a way that's been court approved, and we do it in a way that isn't just look at call data, because really you are there to be a fire department first, and your sunk costs in your stations and your apparatus and your people are there for fire. So we recognize that sunk cost in our allocation between fire and EMS, and go through an exercise, a line item exercise of your budget, and determine what portion of that line item belongs in fire and what goes into EMS. When we finish with that, we end up anywhere between 50 and 85 or 90% of the budget being fundable through the assessment, okay? So I don't want you to worry about that one criteria. Excuse me, I'm just getting over that stupid cold.
Okay, take your time.
What are the two case law requirements? The two case law requirements are that the services or facilities should provide a special benefit to property, and the Florida Supreme Court has ruled that fire services provide special benefit to property. EMS services do not, and that's why they cannot be funded through the assessment. And how you charge people has to be fair and reasonable. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be precise, but it has to make sense in terms of what you're providing. So you would not do a fire assessment based on the front foot of your property, because front feet of your property have nothing to do with fire services. Now, you might do a sidewalk improvement on front feet of your property, or you might do a road assessment on the front foot of your property, but you would not do a fire assessment based on that. Is a fire assessment a tax? Well, like I said, people will feel like it is, but it is not a tax. It is, both assessments and taxes generate revenue to pay for the services and facilities. Both are mandatory and can be collected on the tax bill, but the differences are assessments must benefit property, taxes do not need to. So, for example, you might pay school taxes and not have children in school anymore. With an assessment, you have to have a benefit to your property in order to be paying the assessment. The authorization for special assessments come from your home rule powers. They don't come from the legislature, where the taxes are prescribed by general law, and local governments develop the rate of assessments. So why use assessments? They are a financially stable means of funding fire services. During the recession in few years ago, the departments that had fire assessments as a way of funding some or all of their departments were able to maintain, or at least not recede from where they were. They didn't raise their rates at the time, but they at least were able to keep their services at the same level. It is a dedicated funding source. So what that means is it's no longer vying for those general fund dollars. It's actually now, it has its own dedicated funding source, and it does make it more accountable to the citizens. When they're paying that fire assessment, there's a direct correlation between what they're paying and the service and the benefit they're receiving. So they are more visible to the community. And it is a tax equity tool. I wish we had the map where when people pay taxes in it, you have a neighborhood, and depending on when you buy your property in the neighborhood, some houses are valued at different levels than other houses. Their market value is the same, but their taxable value might be different because they either have a Save Our Homes, a portability, or they have other exemptions. But they're all getting the same level of service from fire because they might all be the same size house with the same kind of materials building the house. So what this does, it makes it be equal. And so those properties who might be paying differently for fire under the ad valorem tax system would all pay the same under the assessment system.
Everybody put a big smile on their face on that one.
Okay. So there are two court-approved methodologies. One is the historical demand methodology, and that's been in existence since the probably early 1990s. The historical demand is the driving factor. What that means is the calls for service that your department has made historically, we use as part of our methodology. It is the most widely adopted. Probably 90% or more of the cities and counties in the state use this historical demand methodology. And it's pretty easy to understand, and it's pretty easy to explain to everyone. The availability method is pretty new. The most recent court case on it is in 2015 with the city of Cape Coral. It's not as tested as the historical demand methodology, and we feel that it's probably going to have more tests in the courts before it becomes more widely accepted, whereas the historical demand methodology, we think all aspects of that methodology have been tried and tested, and we're in good ground now. So in the availability methodology, there's two levels of benefit. You have services available equally to all the parcels as one level, and then you have some the properties paying more based on how much protection they're getting of the value of their property. So it's a little bit on the edge of that value-driven kind of method, but it has been approved by the Florida Supreme Court. It's been predominantly implemented in cities, and it was very it was used most lately in the city of Cape Coral. And the reason they use it in the city of Cape Coral is in this methodology, all parcels pay, even land parcels. And the city of Cape Coral is like a lot of cities where they did a lot of small platted lots, and they sold them to people that may never ever build on them. And so this methodology makes all those platted lots pay for fire services. And so it worked very well for Cape Coral because I think they have 85 or 100,000 parcels, and 90% of those parcels are those platted lots. So in that situation, and probably maybe Palm Bay and a couple other places, it might be something that it might be worthwhile to look at. It is the initial implementation procedures for the availability methodology actually require a bond validation because it's so new and so untested. So far, every one of the cities or counties that have implemented it have actually had to gone through a bond validation hearing to get it approved. Okay, so it has an initial cost to that. Pros and cons of both methodologies. The historical demand is the most widely adopted. It has a lower cost to implement. It is logical and easy for the layperson to understand. Cities don't have to charge vacant land if in fact there's no, not the fire call demand that there is on the vacant land, so that's a decision you get to make. However, the negatives to the historical demand is there is a reliance on historical call data, and typically that there's a flat rate per residential dwelling unit. So every house pays the same, and that could be a problem. Now on the availability methodology, there is a variable rate for residential property, so that is appealing to people because the smaller houses who have lesser value will pay less than the higher valued houses. When a large number of parcels are involved, it helps spread those costs among those properties. However, when there's not a lot of parcels involved, it does shift the costs more to the land and the single-family residential properties. There is a reliance on structure value data, which kind of makes the property appraiser a little bit nervous about you using their value for a methodology. It is a little higher cost to implement the first year because of that bond validation. And there is that land charge requirement. Just going to get into the methodologies just a little bit. I'm not going to go really deep because I know it's probably way more than you want to know today, but this is a primer for you all to hold, and if you have questions, Ryan has our phone number, and I have my cell phone number on there. I'm still answering my phone. And so if you have questions, you could get with them, and they would certainly call us, and we could respond to them. So we look at the data. There's certain data we look for both methodologies. First of all, the service delivery. Are you doing fire? Are you doing fire first response, ALS, BLS? We need to find that out because we have to properly allocate that budget. Your benefit area. This is not so important in a city situation, except for we need to know if you are providing service out into the county, which I think you are, because we definitely have to take those calls out of our mix because we don't want to charge for those calls out in the county if you're already getting compensated or there's some sort of quid pro quo.
Sort of compensation.
Yeah, for making those calls.
Let's not get carried away and thinking that they're going to compensate us for all of it.
So we look at that, and then we look at just how you're providing, what your fire flow is on your apparatus, because we don't want to charge for buildings where your fire flow isn't able there to protect them. So there's just some things we look at there. We look at your fire department budget, and again, if it's an integrated budget, we'll allocate it between fire and EMS. And again, you guys don't have to use that analysis anywhere else, but we have to use the analysis to satisfy the courts. So you don't have to, you can keep your budget together. You don't ever have to split it apart and have it in two different funds, fire and EMS, but it's just something, an exercise we have to go through. We look at the call data. For the historical demand, we actually look at the 1 or 2 or 5 years of call data. We remove the EMS calls, and we look at the fire calls. I think one of the things you're going to ask me is, what about the calls to the roadways, to the car accidents and stuff? Well, we consider those, again, you have a sunk cost for fire, and you're going to be, those sunk costs are there to protect the structures. And if in fact you are providing calls on the roadways and having to do extrication, which is a fire call, we still don't count that call to any property. We consider that almost just an extra benefit to the community that no one pays, okay? We look at the parcel data, so we're taking information from the property appraiser's tax roll, and we're looking at the building on the property, and we're looking at the square footage of the building, so we're looking at the acreage of land if we charge land, and we're looking at the dwelling units in apartments and condos and things like that. And if we go with the availability methodology, we're actually looking at the structural value. This is an example of the historical demand methodology. What we do is we take the net assessment budget, so we're taking the budget that is fire related, which can be anywhere from 50 to 85% of your integrated budget, and we're looking at the call data, and we're taking each call, and in the call data there's, do you guys use NIFRs or FIFRs? Is the fire chief here? No. There's a fire incident.
He's got what you've got, so he's hiding in the back.
Fire incident reporting system, and in the fire incident reporting system there is a fixed property use assigned to a call. So when he responds to a 411, that's a single family residential property. Well, we assign that to residential. If he assigns to a commercial property, we assign it to a commercial property category. So we're taking all those calls, less the EMS calls, and less those calls to the roadways, and we're assigning them to the fixed property uses. We usually have a residential category, which could be single family, multifamily, condos, apartments, mobile homes. Or we could split those out. We can keep them together. It just depends. We'll look at the data and see what makes sense. Non-residential is things such as commercial, industrial warehouse, institutional. In the town of Davie, they have an educational category because they have a whole bunch of educational facilities within their town. We have nursing homes in Broward County, so we actually had a nursing home category down there. So that's what the non-residential, and then we have land if in fact we find there's enough fire calls to land to warrant a category. So once you get all those calls together, you create this pie chart. And what this pie chart is saying, and I gotta look close, it's saying that in this situation, residential property as a category is generating 80.38% of the calls, okay? So residential property as a category has got to fund 80.38% of whatever budget you're going to fund, okay? So all we're doing is we're taking these slices of pies based on the call data and we're applying them to your budget. And then once we've applied those slices of pies to your budget, that portion of the budget that you're going to fund with that category then gets divided by the building units within that category. For residential, it's the number of dwelling units. For commercial, it's the square footage of the buildings. And for land, it would be acreage, okay? So then you get a rate per dwelling unit, a rate per square foot, or a rate per acre. So it is pretty easy to understand. Basically, you're taking the calls, making a pie, taking the portions of the pie and applying them to the budget, and then dividing that budget portion by your billing units. The other one, a little more complicated. It's a two-tiered methodology, and they're basically allocating costs two ways. They're assuming that you're there, there is a sunk cost for fire services, and that sunk cost is there for every parcel of land, whether it's improved or unimproved. And every parcel of land pays the same for that sunk cost. And what they're saying is, and if in fact certain kinds of properties demand service, they're going to pay for that service based on the value of their property that's being protected by the fire services. And they're taking the structure value off the tax roll, and they're taking it in increments of 1,000 or increments of 5,000 and developing what we call equivalent billing units. And it doesn't matter whether you're residential or commercial. They're saying the fire department's there just to protect this much value, this much value, this much value, this much value. So the more value you have on your property, the more you pay, because the fire department has to have the fire protection services to protect that. So everyone pays a base fee, And in this case, the base fee is $353 per parcel, no matter whether you're the quarter acre lot or the Walmart. And then the Walmart pays more on the other part because they have more value associated with their building. A little more complicated, and it's, like I said, it's pretty new. We have not done one yet in this methodology, have we?
Not implemented. We've done some
Studies.
and stuff like that. Not actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little tough.
It makes sense, but again, there's been some court cases out there, and we think, unlike the historical demand that's been out there for over 20 years and been tried, this one's still got some places where we think that people could challenge it.
And I could see where it could, because, well, certainly fighting a fire at our big boxes, it's a different cost structure.
Exactly.
I get that. But a 1,500 square foot house that costs $380,000 versus a 1,500 square foot house that costs $150,000, my cost to fight that fire is approximately
The same. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's and you can have people on both sides of that, and you can have fire chiefs on both sides of that, and you can have lawyers on both sides of it, and that's why we have both methodologies. We're very comfortable with the fact that a call is a call is a call, but we have developed some variations where actually different size, if in fact we can prove that there's an NFPA chart that shows if you get in increments of square feet, you actually do have to have more fire flow. So if we can prove that even in residential, that when you get to a certain size, you really do have to have second engine, third engine, fourth engine, we could make the case, and we have made the case, that those very large houses do pay more because you do need more fire flow for those very, very large ones. So we can go there.
In a scenario where you don't have a lot of
variation,
properties,
then it doesn't matter.
it
You're exactly
seems like
right.
an awful lot of work for a very small part of the population.
And again, 90% of the people who use this methodology don't do any variation. Everything is the same. A house is a house is a house.
And I think we all are trying to, whatever we do, be as fair and equitable about this if we do go this route.
You want it to be easy. You want it to be easy to explain. The one place we did do a value or a size-based thing is in the city of Gainesville. Mm-hmm. And actually, their houses pay differently based on different size houses, based on that NFPA chart, which shows. But it's a lot of work, right? Because you're updating it right now.
Sarasota County too.
Okay.
Values based on square foot.
Okay.
Yeah, keep in mind our stormwater roughly resembles something similar.
Stormwater, every house pays the same.
Dwelling units.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Okay, just going in a little bit on the collection options. Again, you have a utility, so the utility bill is an option. These are the advantages and disadvantages of each collection option. If in fact you were to go forward and wanted to implement an assessment on the tax bill in November of this year, you would have had to adopted a resolution of intent by January 2018. And if you didn't, you would have to get approval from the property appraiser and tax collector for an extension of that. And that would have to happen by March 1st. If you don't intend to go forward for another year or so, then don't worry about it. But I do want you to know that if any year in which you do decide to go forward and you want to use the tax bill, that resolution of intent has to be adopted by January 1st or March 1st if the property appraiser and tax collector agree. If you use the utility bill, you don't have to worry. You could implement it in the mid-year, and we've had places where they have implemented it mid-year and put it on their utility as a line item, like you do stormwater, I'm sure. There's pros and cons to all of them. The tax bill goes to the property owner. The utility bill goes to the renter. I mean, you know all this because you have the utility bill and you have the tax bill. We've seen some cities and counties who have used a little bit of both. Doesn't really work very well. It's kind of messy again, so just bring it up. There is some flexibility though. Implementation procedures, you can see that the tax bill collection method has a whole lot more steps. But basically, you're going to do an assessment report, you're going to get some preliminary rates, and if you have we have the ability to give you a multitude of scenarios. We have, if you look at the very back page of this presentation, we have an interactive database which shows you for a property, this is their taxable value, and we assume a millage that they're paying right now for for fire. And so this is what they're actually contributing for fire right now. And then under the assessment, this is what they'd be paying under the assessment. So we have a line item by line item for every property, what they'd pay, what they're paying now, and what they'd be paying. And that way you can sort through it. You can do winners and losers. You can see how many benefit one way, how many benefit the other way. And you're able to put in the different variable rates of millage or variable rates of the assessment, because once we get to rates, you have a policy decision then about whether or not you want 100% funding, 50% funding of the budget, and or whether you want to just have a half and half or 25-75. So all of that can determine what the final rates are, and you can throw those rates into this database, and it really does give you an idea of who wins and who loses.
This house, this particular one you're showing me, is paying $226.
Which one?
This on your slide.
This one, yeah. That's what they're paying under the, they're paying, I guess they were paying, yeah, they're paying $226. I'm trying to see what they were paying, and so, under the methodology, they'd be paying 120. No, wait, under the, I can't read. Okay.
Unfortunately, your copy's in about a number 7 font.
Yeah, and I can't read it.
Just do this to it.
I see that it says 226 is the rate per dwelling unit, but under the, I'm trying to see what the mill is for, what the millage is, what they're paying under. I don't know. I can get you a better example. I'll get you a better example. We'll send you a better example, okay?
Okay.
I don't think it shows it.
Yeah.
But we'll send you a better chart, just a quick snapshot of a couple of them for you. Remind us to do that.
Keep in mind, it's not necessarily pertinent what.
It isn't, because it has nothing to do, but it gives you an order of magnitude. And it depends on how much they decided to fund, what their millage rate was, what their value of their property is, and all sorts of things. Okay, so this is implementation and all the steps. Okay, and then strategies for success. Our recommendation 100% of the time is don't go out and do a one-for-one, 100% to 100%, because what that does is people, it's not an even trade for each individual property. It might be a trade-off on your budget and the funding, but it's not a one-for-one trade-off for that property owner, because that property owner's value could be different than another property owner's value. They might have been paying differently for fire because of their value of their property. So, we think some mix of a 50-50, 25-75 is usually better until you get it under your belt. You see what you really need to use it for, and it's an annual decision. So, whatever you decide to do, you can fix it or keep it each year depending on what you need. We've had places where they've earmarked it for certain budget items. For example, in Boynton Beach, they had a master plan developed, and they had to build 9 new stations, like in 5 years. And so all they did was said, we're going to keep the operating of the fire department on ad valorem tax basis, but all of the capital costs that we have to do with building the stations and the apparatus is going to be part of the fire assessment rate. And they actually sunsetted it. Of course, then the year they sunsetted it, they reenacted it for other purposes, but they did, that's what they did. So you can earmark it for your strategic plan, your master plan. Having a flexible methodology, there is not, even though these are very, the historical demand is been around a long time, there are so many variations to it. For example, the categories you use, whether or not you weight the calls, whether or not you, call weighting is a big one. Square foot cap, square foot tiers, whether you don't charge on a per square foot basis but have ranges of square feet. So there's things you can do to kind of minimize the impact on properties. Identifying your stakeholders. When we get through with the program, we can tell you who are the top ratepayers. Who's the ones that are going to be calling you. We look at the tax-exempt properties, your government property, your churches and your non-for-profits, and we provide recommendations on those. Government property, you can charge them, you can send them a bill, but you can't force them to pay. So if you're coming in here thinking that you're going to get something from other government property, you're not. Your other institutional properties, that's your policy decision about whether or not you want to charge them. In some cases, we've had cities and counties not charge in the first couple years and give those institutions time to start putting it in their budgets, and then gradually implementing a charge each year so that they can start contributing for fire services, because they're definitely making a demand on the service, but not hitting them all at once. Having lots of public meetings, and you can actually create a hardship exemption. I don't know if you have it for your utilities right now, but if someone really can't pay, you can have them defer paying the assessment, and then upon sale of the property or their demise, then their assessment then gets caught up. So there is ways to create hardship based on income and assets. This is just things we do, not important for us to talk about today. And then there's that interactive thing that I guess this is other things, our public information, phone logs, having a phone bank so that people, when they call you, they get answers and the same answers from everyone, training the people who answer the phone to give those answers. And then those are our tools. So I owe you some better screenshots of that tool, and I hope, sorry, I didn't mean to go that long, but if you have any questions, I'm here.
I'm sure there's one or two questions up here. Chase, why don't we start with you?
I don't really have any questions right now. I'll have some comments later.
We'll come back to you. That's all right. It's a workshop, Bob.
Thank you.
This is about my third time through this, so I don't have any questions.
Scott?
Thanks, first of all.
Thank you.
This is definitely something that I think we need to give consideration and weigh it out, how it fits our city. From listening to the information you provided, the historical demand methodology probably sounds a little bit more of a fit for our area. Although, again, I would love to see, how does that really apply here. I get the concept, I kind of, I guess, follow what you were saying. To me, a fire's a fire. I'm sending the same truck, the same trained people with the same abilities, regardless of if it's a $100,000 structure, if it's $1 million structure.
Right.
They're not getting lesser quality of equipment and people and training and so forth. So I get that methodology. Actually, I like that. I think that'll resonate well with people. They'll understand it. The other thing is you mentioned in there the importance or the ability for people to understand that methodology so much better. Mm-hmm. I think that's a strong point for all of us to keep in mind too, if we look into something like this further. Other than that, I guess the biggest thing would be is to see how do we go, if we want to look at this in more depth, what's the next step for us to see, okay, what would this look like for us?
Unfortunately, there's not a half baby
Right.
step. But you get to rates, and we've had some places sit on them for a year. We've had some places sit on them for 6 months. We've had some places do 3 years and come back and say, now we want to do it because the time's right. Now we've really identified a need. So you can't just do it halfway though, because what we would give you, what any consultant would give you, wouldn't be worth it if you didn't do the real analysis.
Sure, yeah. And I imagine there's similar cities to us,
yes,
in Florida that we can take a look at and see what they've done and how that's worked out for them, and probably even get some feedback from those folks,
yes,
with their pros and cons to
the first year is the hardest. I guarantee you the first year is the hardest because of it's so new and there's a lot of resistance and a lot of misunderstanding. But once that happens, I've come to the hearings later on, and people have come up and said thank you for having this service here. Now we know it's there.
Thank you for presenting and giving us the options and everything. In part of the conversation, I don't remember exactly when, but you said when it comes to basically the calls that are road related, car wrecks or fire or whatever, I get you take the EMS out of it. But you stated in there that it benefits the community and no one pays. But those calls are creating a real cost for those firefighters and medics and fire trucks and diesel fuel and all, maintenance, all those things. So you just can't.
We don't take.
How do you fund
We don't take the
those?
cost of those calls out. We just take those calls out. So the costs are still there, and they're just spread to the other properties in the same way as they would be for the specific properties. So we don't take those costs and say you can't fund them.
Okay.
They're still in the budget being funded, but we don't have any way to capture the.
Okay, that was the confusing
Yeah,
point. where you
and
said
it is
you take
confusing.
them out and then no one pays.
We
them.
do.
Like,
We take the
well, somebody
calls
does
out.
pay.
We take the calls out.
Okay.
And then we let everyone pay because it is a community
Yeah.
thing.
So you take EMS out, and then your millage rate will fund
The EMS.
the
part.
EMS component or portion, and whether or not you have transport or don't, or you get it while you're, doing this or whatever.
Right.
The millage rate, you didn't mention, the millage rate would be reduced
It could be.
based on what?
That would be our
That's your decision.
Okay, because that's where, that's where people would think, okay, this is a new tax, I'm paying for it on millage, and I'm paying for it over here, so that's going to be an issue.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
that is a big policy decision, but we can
Okay.
identify what the costs are and what they are, like I said, to each property owner, so you can make that decision.
So in a perfect world, without the things that are in front of us looming,
Yeah.
this fire assessment, in all things being equal, could, as she said, as a percentage, offset the millage rate, right?
Okay.
We're looking at a possible loss of revenue due to
The new,
the new referendum. So this is
Okay.
a possible alternative way. The other thing she mentioned that I don't want to be missed is there's a percentage that you can start with, 25, 75, 50, 50,
Okay.
75, 25, and that's the split between the assessment and the general fund.
Okay.
After you take the EMS out. So the budget as you know it, the fire budget as you know it, let's just press the I believe button that it will be funded what is required. And then how it's paid for is
Okay.
is what we're looking at.
So $8, $9, $10 million is
So if
$8,
we
$9, or $10
lose,
million.
if we lose a lot,
regardless
if we lose revenue
Okay.
due to a referendum that passes, this is one option to pay for part of that general fund that lost revenue. Obviously, there are many ways to do it. This is just one of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, raising the millage to make up that difference would be another. Not passing the referendum would be a third, and there's a few other ways to do it, but this is just the one that we agreed that we would hear next.
Yeah, well, probably, if it comes about, whenever it does, and if it does, probably have to go property tax bill, right? Because the utility bill, you got so many renters and this and that, and how would you?
That's okay, I would argue the other
you
direction.
could go either way.
We have
Yeah.
many ways to do it, and so, and we've, Tracy and I and Lynn and
Okay.
Margaret have started. The reason we're here now is
Okay.
because we know that tax bill is a long lead time,
Okay.
and we're 18 to 20 months out, 21 months out right now
Yeah.
from possibly
that
losing that revenue, and I don't want to be jumping around like we did for the stormwater.
I think all five of us will agree that if and when that tax bill passes and everybody gets their tax bill hacked because of the extra $25,000 exemption, it's not an option for me, and I've got to assume it's not an option for you guys. Furloughing firefighters, furloughing police officers is not an option for me to make ends meet. Please tell me that we're all in agreement.
Yeah.
Okay. Thus
Can't
the
do that.
conversation today.
Yeah.
That's a non-starter. It's an absolute non-starter.
Which this conversation was had, which is
Yeah.
kind of why we're here now.
I would further say that I wouldn't want to furlough anybody, because we still are going to have, people are going to expect the same services. And we're
Absolutely.
still going to be required to provide those services. So furloughing is not an option for me.
I concur, but particularly in those highly sensitive public safety areas. I mean, I kind of look at, from my viewpoint, Jake, I would like to know more information about the success rate of this on a utility bill. Because certainly I'm looking for it to be kind of a net. I'm not looking to stick it to anybody in a disproportionate way. But I also know that there are a lot of people that own properties that don't pay anything right now. I also know that that might be a very difficult fight for them once a year to pay a $50 or $60 or $48 fire fee, whereas on a utility bill, it might be easier for them to write that $3.97 check every month on a utility bill. Plus, you have the ability to spread it out between all more potential users of the system, because what we're talking about with fire and police is the biggest component of it is making sure it's available and the cost of making sure it's available when it's needed. That's kind of my thoughts on it. So I would particularly like to know the success rate, collection rates, things like that on cities that are doing it on a utility bill from my standpoint.
So we can take a look at that. One of the things that I would like from council here in the next, I don't know, a couple months at the latest is do we want to move forward? Because as Camille said, this is a monumental task. This is going to take a lot of time and energy to come up with, and I don't want to go on a wild goose chase for 18
and
months.
some cost
and then
too
find
as
out.
well.
That's what I mean. So, you know, that's why Ken Parker did it back in '04, and you know, you kind of did the analysis and said it's not quite ready for prime time, and here we are in another situation where it may or may not be ready. But I think we have to agree to take the next big step and plunge into the cold water. And
well, this is why I want to look at it, is because there are so many inequities in a property tax bill. The person who rents a house, who doesn't have a homestead exemption, who's paying a lot more for a fire service portion, versus the guy who owns next door with a homestead exemption is paying a whole lot less. Who's subsidizing who there? And to me, this is an inequitable system. I don't think it'll ever be fully equitable, but I think we can take leaps and bounds into making it more equitable.
Mr. Mayor, that's going to be a hard trait.
yeah,
Because one of the issues that it's founded on before is we have, someone told me, as many as 8,000 mobile homes.
right.
They're
That's
going
my
to take
concern.
They're going to take the big hit. They're our poorest residents. You know, so we really have to have a heart when we look at this. This is a major thing. Second concern is this the time to do it? We have half cent coming up. We have all sorts of other things in the mill. You know, and I would like to state that if I ever consider this, and right now I don't think the time to do it, I would only do it on a one-for-one switch with the property tax. Not to make money, but simply to
that's
see a
where I was going
reduction
with that
in
net
property
net.
tax,
Yep.
dollar for dollar.
Offset the drop.
What?
Offset the,
Yeah, it would, whatever you set the rate at that year.
right. Yeah.
Realize when it occurs, you still can, your rollback rate will be that much higher.
Right.
Okay, so, but I
No,
would
I
just go
get
for
that.
dollar for dollar. I don't want us to be pyramiding fees, just, you know, to get around, you know, budgets.
The more complex, I agree, the more complex we make it, the more we actually add in some of these inequities we're trying to take away. Part of the reason why I wanted to take a look at a utility bill, because somebody who's not used to paying a property tax bill because of their exemptions,
Right.
if we're charging them,
They go from 0 to 500.
and I want to
go,
start
ouch.
small
Right.
and see how it works. I mean, if I'm talking about $48 a year, writing a $48 check for anybody, you think twice about it. But if it's costing you $4 on your water bill a month, it's a little bit more palatable. So there are ways we can do this, and we need to look and talk about all of them before we decide whether we do it or not.
Interesting observation that to think about, put it in your mind's eye. The rate that many of the unincorporated areas are paying for fire is not much different than the entire tax rate of Port Orange.
And I think that's a great point, because we raise what, about $11 million a year in ad valorem, but we pay $8.5 million alone for fire.
So, we'll proceed down that road. We'll give you some options, all the things you talked about, I think you know, between that and it's a good segue. Alan's going to bring up the 5-year forecast that you all kind of asked about in the past. I think it's narrowed down. It'll give you a good indication of what could happen in the future, and there's some manipulatable numbers there, but it might influence how we make a decision. But Councilman Ford, I think you bring up a good point about the
My district
low
will be,
income.
will
Well,
be
I don't
destroyed.
I don't even want to say district. It's the people with that aren't paying taxes that even the additional $25,000 is not going to do them any good, because they're already not paying anything, and now we're gonna slap a bill on them that has nothing. So
It's
I get
already
that.
inequitable, but there's an affordability.
I get that, and I
put it on the
understand
scale and kind of doing this with
We're
it.
going to
a little
have
bit.
to look at it very
I understand the
cautiously.
utility bill as well.
The
So,
other thing I wanted to throw out too is that anything that we can do to guarantee and secure our fire rating is a positive to residents when it comes to their homeowners insurance.
Yes,
If the city has a good, continues to have good and improve our ratings, people will save dollars on their homeowners insurance because the fire rating's improving. That's a fact. So this, in a way, indirectly or directly, depending on how we do it, can have an impact on that. We can have a net effect, improve our funding source dedicated to fire, and then at the same time, maybe even save some people on the homeowners insurance.
and one of the things that Camille said is it's scalable. If something comes up in the future and we need to increase it, we can. If we find that things got better quick, then we decrease it. We can scale it accordingly. The long pull in the timeline for us is if we decide to put it on the tax bill, then Margaret, me, and Tracy we need some lead time. So that's again why we're starting out this early, and once that decision is made, we'll know where we are on the timeline and notifications.
And we'll have to have another discussion after we've all had a chance to chew on what we've had here today.
Yep.
In the near future on that. Just keeping in mind that if we keep it on the tax bill, what that does to people when they've got to write that bigger check when they've never written a check before. But
Oh,
there
yeah.
again,
No
they need that
doubt.
protection.
No doubt. All right.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Jake, to that note that we're talking about there.
Sure.
I know we know roughly how many properties currently in the city of Port Orange don't pay any taxes. Should this pass in Tallahassee and that homestead increase, do we know what that number is going to change to roughly, or?
Yeah, about
I think it jumps from 700 to just over 1,000.
The loss of revenue?
No, the amount of
How many
homes-
Number of
total properties
residents
in
that
Port
no
Orange?
longer would be paying
non-taxable.
taxes.
that's more than that.
Yeah. So
Because we
you
have
maybe
what,
get that number to us
21,000
in-
properties, something like that.
Some point?
I'm sure we
yeah,
can
we can get it for you.
Okay. Just a ballpark idea. I'm trying to, because I thought we were kind of getting close as we are now to about 1,000 residents.
We were.
I thought
We're
we
full.
That was like
781.
983, I thought the number was.
781 last
Okay.
budget season, I
Okay,
think.
all right. Yeah, just when you have a chance,
771.
I'd be curious
Sure.
to know what that number is. Thank you.
More.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clearly.
All right.
Anything else on this one?
Okay.
It being a workshop,
Thank you, Camille.
this is usually just us having a conversation, but because of the impact on that, if there's anybody that would like to comment from the public on this item, I would invite anybody in the public that wants to ask a question or make a comment now before I move on.
Anybody?
There being none. Item 6, Team Volusia Quarterly Report from Mr. Keith Norden.
Sir, I think, Mayor, I think Keith and Dwight are going to tag team here. Dwight being the board chair for the...
They wouldn't let you go.
I look like Keith.
You served a year and they wouldn't let you go.
That was the meeting I didn't attend.
That's usually how that works.
We know how that goes, right?
You can use that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your service to Team Volusia.
Sorry. That was pretty rude.
That's all right.
Thank you.
If there's enough, I get one.
Yeah, relax.
Don't give stuff to the city manager.
I may have one.
Thank you.
I may have one. I may.
Looks familiar.
No, I'm
Yes,
good.
it does.
I have one.
Good evening, everybody.
My daughter.
I promise I'll give you the 10,000-foot view of this.
Tell
I
us
won't
who
go
you
through
are.
it. And then we can go back and go over anything that you want to go. My name is Dwight Durant. I'm by day, I work for Zev Cohen and Associates, mostly for Bobby. And by, I guess, night, I work for Keith as chair for Team Volusia. And Keith was a little hesitant to let me come up here today. I asked him if I could do it, just because I hadn't been here in a while. But Keith is certainly capable. He didn't want to give the impression that he wasn't interested. So he is definitely here, as Jim Kemering is here too, please. So anyway, what I wanted to do is kind of hit some highlights of Team Volusia, just to re-educate you a little bit on that, who we are, what we do. We're a business development activity. We are the official, we are the official development organization for Volusia County, focusing on business attraction. The county does business retention, we do business attraction. We represent Volusia County and the 16 cities in it. We're all members, that's hence the word team. That has worked out real well. I've been here since day one, and that was not always the case. It is now, and it actually is a nice thing to watch, because I've been here for 35 years and I've seen it when the cities did not talk to each other. We currently have 102 investors in 12 cities and the private sector. Here's how we're judged. This is our pipeline. It goes through different stages. With stage 0, we're just kind of chatting, and then it gets down to the serious part, down to the stage 5 is when Keith announces that we have a success. The numbers that you're seeing here for 2017, we had 7 successful projects this year that created 1,303 jobs, the payroll of over 46 million, and a capital investment of over 55 million. Keith's done a really good job for us. Breaking them down a little bit, by use, have office, retail, commercial, professional services, and industrial and manufacturing. You can see the industrial and manufacturing is the big seller here. By source, the key to this one is if you look at the green and the gray, represents 68% of where the projects come in, and those are solely provided by Team Volusia. The state and local communities provide some, but by numbers, if Team Volusia wasn't here, 68% of these may or may not come to this community. If you look at it, a graph by community, obviously Port Orange is the orange one. There has been 18 projects submitted on behalf of Port Orange this year by Team Volusia to prospective clients. These are those, and they've reached various stages. On the right, that's referring to the pipeline, stage 1 all the way down to stage 4. This is 2017. In the past, some have made it to stage, the final stage where there's been an announcement, but 4 is what we've had this past year.
Can we go back for a
Sure.
second, Mayor, if you would, I point your attention to the industry use, that the preponderance of recommendations or people that are interested in Port Orange are majority of professional service, and that kind of fits right into what we have available here, less so manufacturing.
Concur.
So.
Here's a chart that means a lot to me. Pay attention to the 2 middle columns, the 2017 goals and the 2017 TV EDC-led projects. If you look at on the left side, the outreach, the goals were 26. Team Volusia provided 31 outreach proposals. The goal was to write 12. We were at 31. Site visits, 15. We had 48. The marketing packages sent out, we were right on task there, 54 to 50. Pre-arranged meetings, we had 56 instead of 36. And then when you get into the blue, the job creation is what it's all about. The goal, which was set from previous year by the board and the executive committee, which you guys are a part of, was 8.4 mil or 236 to 394 jobs, 1,006, and that's TV EDC led projects. If you look at projects that they also supported, they had 297, and that's where you get to the 1303. It's a pretty good year. And then you look at the payroll and the capital investment, those are the numbers I gave you before. So in all facets, we met or exceeded our expectations for 2017. Those are some of the ones that you see. I'd like to mention the one in the top, Teletech. That was first brought to Port Orange, but it didn't suit the potential landowner for their particular project. We were able to save it and keep it in Volusia County, so I'm sure you have some employees that live here now. Marketing, we've completely overhauled the marketing, gone through a strategy of success. These are some of the documents that you'll see that try to serve our target industries. Those are advanced manufacturing, aviation, headquarters, medical health, professional services, and logistics and distribution. I'm going to pass these. We only have one copy of these, but what we've marked is where they're significant for Port Orange. You can keep those, but that way I don't have to go through them here tonight. National publications, we are state, federal, and U.S. and global. These are some documents or some maps that show you how far out we reach, and the one on the right is the population within the circles that is the target industry. And then we have the electronic marketing with the website and social media, which I invite you to go online and take a gander at that, because that's been updated as well. Economic Development 101. This is something that Team Volusia offers. There are several slides here. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but I'd like to let you know that Chris Wimsett, that works for Keith, he's the number 2 guy in charge, and he runs a short course basically on how to do economic development and how, give you your homework, how you can interface with Team Volusia, and he'd be happy to come here for one of your evenings in a workshop or a city council meeting and provide you with that short course. He was actually supposed to be in Deltona or Deland tonight. So it's a service that you provide. I highly suggest going through that, and you'll learn things that I don't even know about. If you do it, I want to come watch. So this is in your PowerPoint. You can go through that. But if you look, the business and the personal side on the left, and the cost factors and the other key factors in obtaining businesses to come here, those are the criteria that they go through. Competitive alternatives, these are the things that you need to pay attention to when you're competing against the rest of the world out there. And then, as Keith will tell you many times, it's really not the process of selection, but it's the process of elimination. This is actually what they go through, and your goal is to be that last dot at the end after they go through the different criteria, and you're left here with a project here in Port Orange. Product, programs, and people, that's the 3 Ps that are normally known. And again, if we want to come back to these, we can apply these to the city of Port Orange, but they're somewhat lengthy. This is what Keith does for a living, and he knows far more about it than I do. Questions of how to make Port Orange more competitive. Determine your short and long-term economic goals. Be glad to kind of answer some questions on that. You need to know where you're headed, what you like, or your needs and desires being told to the board, and are they being followed through with Team Volusia's? Are your goals as similar as the ones that we have set up? Your real estate product development, that kind of dabbles a little bit in the stuff that I do. You might not have the product that you need, but there's ways to get it. You can go through administrative rezonings, you can talk to property owners, you can have those things listed. His job is to sell it, and the more you give him to sell, the more successful he's going to be, and I can tell you right now you're a little short on that product. Identify sites with development potential. That's a little more of what I was talking about. Focus on site readiness. That's the shovel-ready stuff. If you get the entitlements taken care of on a particular piece of property, then you're winning far more points in that process of elimination that you're going through. Workforce attraction, supply and training within a 30-minute drive. That's what you're looking. That's going to affect your community. And then the last two, cross-promote marketing with Team Volusia, actively participate. I'd like to invite you guys to come to a board meeting. I'll introduce you and let you see around. Jake's been to plenty. We also have practitioner meetings, which you need to have somebody at. Right now I know you have kind of a staffing problem, but that's where the practitioners of all the city, and that's the beautiful thing to watch, all of them working together to try to bring somebody here to Volusia County, because you know that it spills over. You might not get it right in your city, but it will certainly affect you. And gentlemen, I'll tell you, I've been here a long time, and that has never existed. The other thing that hasn't existed that exists now is this year in 2017, the private sector investment exceeded the public sector. So guys like me are spending more money on it than guys like you. Maybe you might be in the private side of it as well. But that was our goal. We're not going to keep there. Try to keep the lines continuing to diverge, but that's a significant milestone that we met this year. Just pay attention to the map on the right. What that means is you've got 3,090 jobs here in Port Orange where they live here and work here. You've got 10,492 jobs that come into your city on a day-to-day basis, and you've got almost 18,000 that leave. Knowing what some of your issues are, the way I'm looking at that, you got 7,000 jobs leaving in the morning, and 7,000 coming back, in the 7,000 people coming back in the
And they all take
afternoon.
Dunlop.
And they all take Dunlop.
Yeah,
So if you create that energy here, you're solving some of your problems by creating your industry here. You know, 10 years ago, the city of Port Orange didn't have a whole lot of commercial, and you guys stuck your head down and said we need to get more commercial, and you went through that, some of the administrative rezoning, and you balanced that out, and it made things, I believe, far more better for you than what existed before. These are some of the stats on your properties. Available land is on your left. At the bottom, how many properties you have. I won't read those to you. You can read. But for instance, if you look on the right, your buildings for lease. You've got 42 properties for lease here in the city. We know this. This is what Heath does. This is what his people do. They do it for all cities. So we might know more about your city than you do. Properties over 5,000 square feet, you have 10. Properties over 10,000 square feet, you have 4. So out of the 42 properties, 32 are less than 5,000 square feet. That's where you need your product. That being said, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and I know Keith would like to get started talking if you have any things for him. But I'll work for you, so you give me some direction, and I'll follow through with it.
Questions for Dwight, anybody? Come on, Keith.
You know I'm not shy, so.
No. Never would have guessed. So you shanghaied him for another year.
Yes, it took a lot of work on my part.
Good job on that one. I hope you doubled his pay.
Exactly. Well, I just wanted to thank you for your continued investment.
Who are you for the record, please?
Keith Norden.
Okay.
And my address, would you like my address?
Sure, why not?
231 Riverside Drive, Holly Hill, Florida.
Wrong city, I'm sorry.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
We have a Riverside Drive.
Yes, we do.
Exactly.
In the River District.
Beautiful Riverside Drive. I just wanted to thank you for your continued investment. You know, you have funded us from the beginning when we only had 9 cities. We actually have 13 cities contributing into our program. And it's been a real pleasure working with you and your staff. I might say that we've had a couple of near misses with Teletech. We had a broker that wouldn't allow the usage in the building. It was an old retail building, but that was 900 employees. And then we worked very hard with ViStar Credit Union back in early 2016, and then actually toured the entire board of directors, chairman of the company, all around Volusia County, but actually toured them at their present location. They were so pleased with our overview of Volusia County, they came on as an executive committee member. So, and they are in a leadership role along with your city manager. So just wanted to thank you. Things are very, very bright. Our pipeline has over 100 projects in it. And you know, when I came to Team Volusia, we really converted and transformed into a sales operation. So we work with that pipeline of projects daily, and it changes daily. So happy to answer any questions. And Dwight, you did a great job. I'm glad you came on for the second year. So any questions from the City Council? Councilman?
What is is there a draw, and what's been our challenge as far as getting some manufacturing out there on Williamson? I've always been under the impression that that area was built out for that purpose, or I see at least that was a vision in mind years ago.
You know, Dwight, you can answer, but it's really about product. You have to have sites that are available and that are ready for development, because we have companies coming in that want a quick turnaround, and they have to be sure that if there's no existing buildings, they have to be sure that they can construct their building in a fast way, and the sites have to be ready. So we have a lot of greenfield sites. The whole county is just, anyone that rides around thinks that we're loaded with sites, but in fact the Trader Joe's project that went to Daytona Beach, we were shortlisted, but the actual preferred site was in Jacksonville, and the only way they decided on Volusia County was to get the site ready before they purchased the site. They decided to come, but they said, we're not going to close on anything. We're not going to make an official announcement until you have the site shovel ready with utilities and all that. So, and that's what the competition is.
Chase, as you probably know, it's probably about a 6 to 9 month process to go through rezoning and site plan approvals. Some of the properties that you're referring to, you have done. You've gone through and you've put infrastructure in and you've platted the property. You still have to go through a site plan. When the food U.S. Food was put out there, that was actually a government or a governor's fast track program, and we designed and permitted that from December 1 through the middle of January, over Christmas break, with the Water Management District and the governor's office. So it can be done if you want to do those things. You just have to kind of set your priorities what you want to do. But generally speaking, the city doesn't own a lot of land, and so a lot of the green areas that are owned by private developers, if you can have a workshop and bring those in and convince them that you're going to administratively rezone their property, leave the existing use so they don't change their taxes, but also put some other uses in there, don't cost them anything, and then their property becomes far more palatable and easier to go because those uses are already established.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
How does, I understand the economic development portion of seeking out companies that want to come and locate and base their operations in the Volusia County area. But what about companies that are growing rapidly, that are already here, maybe some of the homegrown businesses? How does Team Volusia get involved in trying to identify them, to say, man, you're doing great, you're on our radar, we know in 5 years you're going to need to expand, and we want to do everything we can to keep you here? How does that process?
Well, about actually right before I arrived in Volusia County, it would have been March of 2012, there was a decision to separate what we did from the county, so there would be no overlap. Mm-hmm. So the county does existing industry calls along with the chambers in some of the cities, and retention, and then we are only focused on business recruitment outside the area. That's the decision of our executive committee and our cities and our county. That may not always be the way, and there could be some gray areas where we really should be calling on some companies.
Well, and I can appreciate what you're talking about. I understand that, and I get the driven focus to focus on what you've been asked to focus on. I was just curious, who's looking for that, because at the same time where we're looking to bring in great jobs and quality growth, I'd hate to be losing those companies that have grown here that end up leaving.
You're right about that, because 80 to 90%, the national average is 80 to 90% of all the jobs that are created are from companies from within.
Okay.
So our mission is very direct and focused, but the true job growth, for instance, if you look at some of the expanding companies we've had announced last year, they're bringing on about 900 employees this year that were incentivized by the Volusia County Council.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Stiltner, the chamber, the leads groups, all that after hours stuff, I'm always going to a certain extent, the Florida League of Cities and other events, Team Volusia executive events where we meet with the private. Our circles, our paths cross a lot. That's and Rotary as well. That's where I'm in touch with all these people, and the mayor as a active chamber member as well. And we're kind of tracking that, and that's how we kind of, like Bill Thompson, for instance, we're like, Bill, gotta stay, let's get you out there, let's move forward and kind of get him up off his chair and going. And so we continually look, and I reach out and touch U.S. Foods, Radon, all the big ones, because we don't want to lose them, and then the small ones that are starting to grow. We're starting to watch that. So
we still have plenty of room in Eastport too.
Absolutely, I think the city might be out of that business here in the next week or two.
Scott, Keith is very polite and politically correct. I'm an engineer.
You don't have to be. Go ahead, lay it out there.
Oh, no. So if there is somebody that is interested that is here, you can always call Team Volusia. We will contact the county EDC. And let them know, kind of bring everybody to the table, and then we will speak when spoken to.
Right with that, I think there are a lot of small players in economic development in the county, but there are three very big ones. Team Volusia, yourselves, you've got the CEO Alliance, Kent Sharples, you've got the county with Rob Earhart. Talk a little bit about, certainly there's some bleed over that makes sense and you work together, but you don't want to duplicate each other's missions. Talk to me a little bit about how you differentiate and what you target as compared to them.
Well, actually, CEO Business Alliance is an all-private group, so they can do things that we can't do because we're public-private and we receive public funds. They do some recruitment, but it's not traditional. They're typically not getting on planes. They're not traveling, which you have to do to identify businesses and build relationships in particular industry sectors. They do invite businesses that they identify to come for a visit. They also do a lot of wonderful things for the community. So, and we don't do grants, we don't do funding for studies. Our focus is directly for business recruitment. But we collaborate beautifully. So typically if we have a visit from an out-of-town company, we will bring Rob Earhart because the county has incentives, and we will bring Kent Sharples and other stakeholders to the table for the first visit. And I would say, again, with Dwight, I was politically correct, but I also am very involved in the chambers. We're members of every chamber. I go to many of the meetings. I'm a Rotarian. So I will, if I do hear of a company, then we would not just say, call Rob Earhart. We would introduce that company to Rob Earhart and the appropriate chambers in the city to make sure that they had the right partners at the table as they went on to expand.
See, I think the tough thing for us is with everything we have to give proper scrutiny to that we write checks for. And every year I ask myself the same question, am I getting good value out of Team Volusia? Yeah, because the obvious is, did they bring anything big into Port Orange? Maybe yes, maybe no, but collectively speaking, I think it's also important to look at the numbers. While you might not have necessarily put a big manufacturer in our neighborhood, maybe some smaller professional services, but I also know that those businesses, those people are going to live, they might not work in Port Orange, but they're going to live here, they're going to shop here, they're going to eat here, they're going to go to the pavilion here. So anytime we have a chance to improve our job base for our residents, even though they might actually have to leave Port Orange for the job, that is one of the parts of the equation for me. So I know that even though the win might not be there as far as what we bring in into our zip codes, certainly I like that, but there's a bigger picture at play here.
That's correct. Actually, of the 6 or 7 that we mentioned, 4 of those were solicited here in Port Orange first. You know, they didn't select it, so you know, like if you,
I don't know what's wrong with them.
If you don't, if you go fishing, don't catch something, you don't give up fishing.
Absolutely not.
And right now, Chris gave me some stats. Just right, there's 5 projects right now that is considering the city of Port Orange.
Excellent.
So there's
Very
something in the
active
pipeline.
projects.
And it's a good question because Don, I asked myself, I write a $10,000 check every year. Am I doing the right thing? And I got to tell you, without a doubt, the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing it, our business has increased. And I don't think it's a result of seeing the business exactly. I haven't gotten a job, you know, an engineering job out of any of them, but the collaboration that is created and getting to know folks like you as a result of the process has strengthened the whole community. And I think that you can recognize over the last 8 years or so that things have really increased. So I can't put my finger on it. I just know that we got it.
Yeah, and if it's kind of hard, it's like when things are good, you're always looking forward, what can be better, what can be better. And it's hard to look back. 2010, wow, it was ugly.
It was horrible.
Yes. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, anything else for them?
Thank you for
You're done.
allowing us
Appreciate
to
it.
Thank you again.
come talk to you.
No, I think that this is important because when we make budgetary decisions year in and year out, we need to be able to hear from you and know what we're getting.
Thank you, Mayor.
I will reach out to you guys individually and invite you to some of the meetings as one of my guests, and you can come
And we want to
see
help.
what happens. Yes.
Just if
Only
we have
from
a
the
neighbor up the
standpoint of-
road, we can help get something big. Yeah, any way we can help, please let us know.
Mayor and council, are you all interested in me setting up a workshop and having the economic development 101?
Sure.
We'd be happy
You
to
guys
do that.
opposed? Staff would enjoy it. All right.
Great.
We'll get you in a few months.
You
Thank
said
you.
staff would enjoy it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'll tell them. They'll enjoy it.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yes. I'll reach out. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you,
appreciate it.
And Mark, thank you.
Have a good night.
Let's see, it's not 9 p.m. We have the
No, but
5-year
Ellen's up.
model prediction. So it's not 9 p.m., so PowerPoint is okay. But before we do that, why don't we take a 5-minute recess and we'll come back in 5 minutes. Recharge your batteries.
Oh,
Yes.
look who's in a good mood.
Yeah,
She
that's
doesn't
right.
have anything on the agenda.
We are back.
I see how it is.
Item 7, 5-year model prediction. Mr. Rosen.
Alan Rosen, yes.
Oh,
go ahead.
but before Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council,
Mr.
before,
Johansson.
before Alan starts, I think you know the background on this. This is something that we've talked about many times, and Alan put his nose to the grindstone and came up with a working model here. There are some assumptions in there that he's going to brief you on that are not easily in the spreadsheet changeable, but easily for him to adjust if we think the assumptions are different than what they are. He did his best bet based on research. And then there's some movable objects in here for you all to play with after he briefs it. I'd like to personally thank Alan because he spent a lot of time on it. Might not be the prettiest PowerPoint, I don't know, but the data behind it, there's a lot of work down there. So thank you, Alan, and go ahead.
We appreciate your kids choosing the pictures.
Yeah, right.
This
They're
is
very talented.
Bob and I go back to 2010, and we've been talking about the need for long-range forecasting models for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's funny, Jake, that some of the things you just mentioned were a couple things that you and I just mentioned in a side conversation that
the assumptions.
this is not gospel.
No.
By any means to
It's a
stretch the
tool.
imagination.
It's a tool.
And the further out, the more we change things, you got internally, you got the external environment that affects it, and the further out you go in time, the more those things affect it. Policies, et cetera, and so forth. But in the meantime, we've got a baseline to start with.
Well, that was my presentation.
Thank you.
Great.
All 18 slides?
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty much.
Take it away.
Well, congratulations. We've almost gotten to the interactive portion of this session. I've got a PowerPoint, and then after we go through the PowerPoint, which will kind of show the assumptions, how we built this model, we're going to actually get a chance to play with it a little bit from the dais. I'll plug in what you guys want to plug in. You'll see how it changes it. We'll talk about some lessons learned, and then you'll be able to take this home. We're going to use it from the administrative standpoint, and you guys can use it in the future to plug in stuff at home and see how it works. So what is a forecast? We were just kind of talking about that. Basically, you take data, things that have happened in the past, and things that you think are going to happen in the future. You put them all together, and you see where that leads you as a trend. So for this purpose, this tool is used to predict the impact of decisions. So whatever decisions we make now, how's that going to impact us in the future? Is it perfect? No. Just like anybody forecasting the weather, the longer you go out forecasting, the less accurate that's going to be. But you try to do your best, again, based on things that have happened in the past, things that you know about that have absolutely happened, and forecast that stuff into the future.
Don't compare with the weather. I've never seen you get that right.
So I say usually within 5%. A long time ago in a past life when I was a budget analyst, we had measures that we guided ourselves by, and we tried to forecast revenue and expenses within a plus or minus 5%. We were usually better than that, but that was kind of our variable to make sure we were doing our jobs okay. And you'll see a little bit later on today that we've actually done a pretty good job in the city forecasting that as well. So there are certain things we built this model on. There's uncontrollable variables and manipulable variables. So basically variables that you have little control over and those that you have more control over.
Is that Jake's hands with the puppet strings there?
Yeah, I don't, I went to a session a year ago, a couple of months ago. They say you should never use clip art. I'm sorry, I just love clip art. I can't get away from it. So those things that are uncontrollable, and
Or
you'll see
your wife loves you anyway.
Yeah. Those things that are uncontrollable, it doesn't mean that you have absolutely no control over them, but the forces external to us have more control over than we might. Those things that are manipulable, you have much more control over. So we'll take a look at some of those. So the things that you don't really have much control over: taxable value, new construction, and I'll get into more detail of these in a minute, healthcare costs, the consumer price index, disasters, how much we have to pay out, how much we get paid back, and historic average savings. And when I mean that, it's things that have happened in the past, not, obviously we have a lot of control over how much we save in the future by how much we budget and don't spend. But I've used what's happened in the past to forecast some things, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So these are things that have built the model that you're going to see in a minute, right? And these are things that I've researched extensively to come up looking at maybe 15, 20 years of information and thinking about things that are going to happen in the future to figure out how we plug into this model. So first thing is taxable value, which factors into our revenue from our real estate taxes, right? So over the last 15 years, the average percent change in taxable value, forgetting about new construction, has gone up 5%. Sure, you've got your troughs and your valleys, but average year you're looking at 5% increase. So that's what you see in your first year in FY19. Your FY20 forecast, this is my assumption. My assumption is the homestead exemption will pass. If that is the case, the value of property in this forecast will go down. So that translates roughly into about a loss of about $1 million in revenue during 2020. And then you see it gradually go up 2%, 4%, 5%. This is the result of a correction in the market that we assume is going to happen in 2020. A lot of economic forecasters saying that we're going to hit a little bit of a trough, and then hopefully we'll come back out of it. Not as bad as it was back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, but nonetheless, a slower increase in the value of property. So that's what we factored into here.
Real quick, Alan. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying business cycle.
Yeah, I know they were predicting that a couple years ago. Is that still the consensus?
It's still the consensus. I'm not showing, the only decline I'm showing here, this 8.6%, is only the value of homestead exemption if that gets voted in. I'm not showing a decline in addition to that in taxable value. It could be worse, it could be better, but this is what we've got for our baseline values.
2% is pretty flat if you're going to look at adjusting for any kind of bubble or business cycle.
The other thing we looked at is revenue from new construction. So I took this out and wanted to forecast it separately because it is its own separate thing. We do get new construction every year, or most years. There's two ways to do this. I look at historical trends and figure out about how much we get every year. However, the other more accurate way is we actually have data in our brains right now about what may be coming in the future, because people come and they meet with community development and they say, thinking about doing this, they may have already pulled some permits, they may be working on construction. So for the next 5 years, I met with community development and went through a list of everything that they know of right now that is coming through the pipeline. And based on those values, this is the revenue from new construction. And to give you an idea, I've got the numbers, they're in my notes, they don't show up here. But in FY 2020, that's about $114 million of value, equates to $492,000 in revenue. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you think about the property, you've got the just value, the just value, the assessed value. They usually take about 20% out, and then the taxable value they take out even more. It depends on whether it's homesteaded. All that stuff factors in, and you get these values. Now, could it go up? Yeah. Could it go down? Yeah. But this is what we know about today that may be coming out. So some of these people may pull out, other people may pull in, may come in. So I've added those into the forecast. Increase in healthcare costs. Again, we don't have a lot to do with this. This is external factors figuring this in. I looked at 2 or 3, 4 sources for some of these things, and they're all within a fraction of a percent of each other, where we think we're going to be on increases in expenditures for healthcare over the next couple of years. It's pretty straight across the board, 5.9, 5.8%, and that's actually what I think we've been seeing in the last couple of years anyway. Now, could this go up and down? Absolutely. If we have a bad year, this might go up 15, 20% in 1 year. We've seen cities in the area that happened to last year or the year before. If we have really good experience, we have really healthy employees, maybe we'll be able to keep it a little bit below this. It also depends on our ability to negotiate, which is what we have Brown & Brown for, to keep these levels in check. But generally, external forces are going to keep it around this unless we have really bad or really good experience. So this is in the forecast. Consumer Price Index. We really don't have much control over this. Looked at 3 different sources, and they were all right around the same point. CPI is starting to increase, especially as the economy goes up, prices are starting to go up. And as you probably know, construction's going up, very fast. We put out for something thinking, we budget for something $500,000, sometimes it's coming back at $1 million. But this assumes in the forecast, if I buy the same thing today as I buy tomorrow, I buy a sheet of paper today, I buy it tomorrow, next year it's probably going to be about 2.3% more expensive. So this is assuming no changes in program, to buy the same thing. These are the type of increases you're going to see year over year for your operating cost. That's included in the budget. The other thing we have no control over are natural disasters. So when we start to see the model that you're going to play with, am I killing you?
No.
Okay. the things that are already in the forecast, we've already had Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma. We've spent some money. We expect to get some money back. So you're going to see some peaks and valleys that are already included in there because I assume we'll get some of that money back. Just depends on the timeline. Either way, it'll filter itself out through the forecast.
Hopefully we'll get that money by the
Sooner
time
rather than
these
later.
5 years pass, but.
Yeah. Savings. So comments that I've heard in the past about budgeting is we never spend the entire budget, right? And usually we don't, as evidence here. And this is unassigned fund balance. So this is how I describe this to people who, I don't want to say unassigned fund balance, eyes glaze over. If you have $100 in the bank, and that year you make money and you spend money, at the end of the year you have $105 in the bank. You saved $5. It could go the opposite way too. That's kind of what our unassigned fund balance in the general fund is. It's kind of our savings account. It's not tied to anything else. It's not a rollover because we have this project we didn't finish. It's really that bank account that's still sitting there. So over the last 7 years, it's kind of hard to forecast because we've had really big peaks and really big valleys. But the average on a regular seems to be about 2%. We've added 2% to that bank account, all things being equal. The reason I did this is because if we haven't expended our general fund, what I wanted to do, and I've done this to kind of throw it in there. Budget guys and finance guys don't normally do this, so Tracy's cringing in the back.
Tracy's hiding.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
we're very, you know us, we're very conservative. And if we say at the beginning of the year that we're going to have a budget, we budget that because we want to budget to get to zero. We never get there. It's like a forecast, right? As you go out through the year, you realize that you're going to spend more or less of what it is. You adjust your budget accordingly. So what I've done is I've figured out how much I think we're going to spend each year, and I've subtracted 2% from it, assuming that we're not going to spend about 2% of that budget, and that's going to roll over as savings.
You're being very conservative. Now, what you're throwing in there is a lot of things from the hurricanes and the like that have artificially depressed it, but it's usually between 5 and 7% a year that we don't spend.
And there's more that we don't spend. A lot of that is tied to, and I looked at this specifically. I took all the different fund balances because we have fund balance, you're absolutely right. We have more than that that's left over. A lot of that is tied to projects that we don't do. Let's say we're going to do a project, but we're waiting for hurricane money, and we set aside some money, so we roll that to the next year so we don't tax people again twice for it. We've had some that we've rolled over for fixing salary adjustment levels, 114,000. All that's the entire fund balance. This 2% is that unassigned that it's not tied to anything. We could use that for whatever we want. Still have to be careful. You want to keep it at a good level just in case we have an emergency. But that's what I've done is kind of made sure that I'm assuming we're not going to spend everything. So that's already in the budget. I'm not assuming we're spending 100%. So what are those things that are easily manipulable? There are more than what's here, but these are kind of the big ones. So we've got millage rate, fire service fee, which we kind of talked about earlier today, the number of positions we have, the change in overall salary, how much we spend, capital expenses, and the addition and subtraction of programs. So there are fees, charges, there's other things too. But in the general fund, in this tool that you have, you can change around these things to figure out how it's going to impact in the future, because you have these are easily controllable. So now I'm going to show you the assumptions that I've gone in with, just because I had to throw something in there. I couldn't put zero, I couldn't put nothing, I didn't want to change it.
Yeah.
So this is what you guys are going to start, the council's going to start getting to play with, and we can all play with too to see how it spits out in the future. So right now we're at a millage rate of 4.4881. So I just assumed, all right, let's just leave that the same from now into the next 5 years. We're not going to change it. Now, you could go to rollback.
Good assumption.
Thank you. You could go to rollback, you could go higher, you could go lower, you could do whatever you want. Obviously, and I'll talk about this in each of these slides, there's an impact, both positive and negative, to making any changes you want, right? You make it higher, there's a political impact there. But you also increase the revenue that you have to do things with. You lower it, there's a political impact there too, but there's also less money to do things that for programs that you want to provide the public. And of course, there's always that interplay between the value of real estate as well. Fire service fee. It's a revenue option, something we heard about tonight. It's something where you can diversify your revenue stream, do some other things with. You could do one for one, you could raise it a little bit more, you could add programs, take away programs. I've assumed no fire service fee in this forecast, but there's an option to throw it in there if you want to, just to see what happens.
Alan, keeping in mind, if we do a net-net, it's not going to have much of an impact on that anyway, would you?
I would agree.
Yeah, net. It'll be a wash.
Right. Now keep in mind, what you'll see what the forecast is, I'm assuming we're going to lose $1 million, let's say, in revenue in 2020 based on if the additional homestead gets included. So you'll see what happens with the revenue expenditures there. And then it'll be council's decision with us implementing how you want to deal with that in the future. So positions. So I took a look at the positions in the general fund. This is only general fund positions, so don't think 450 or whatever it is that we have all. This is just general fund, because that's all we're forecasting here. It's only one part of our entire budget. Right now we have 301 positions in the general fund. And this is the interesting thing. I looked back about 20 years and I looked at the number of FTEs per 1,000 population. Because generally as your population increases, you generally, even if you're providing them the same programs, in some areas you're probably going to be able to need to provide more resources for them to be able to provide even the same level of service. So what I did is I looked at based on that ratio, how many people would we have to have based on the population that Bieber tells us that we may have in the future. So if you look at this, it stays about the same, and then it increases by about 3 each year starting in 2020, just to provide the same level of service without increasing the number of programs or the type of programs. It's just an idea. That doesn't mean that's the end-all be-all. It was just something that I thought about. In the forecast, I kept it the same. So there are no increase in positions. It's 301 positions in the general fund from now until the end of the 5 years. And again here too, you add if you want to add positions, you'll be increasing the service level which you can provide, but you're also increasing costs. So there's a payoff. You lower the number of positions, you're going to decrease the service level, but the cost goes down. So percent change in overall salary costs. So again, I kept this in the forecast 3% across the board. Again, we can change it as we go and play with this model. 19 and 20 is mostly set because we've got some long-term union contracts are already in place. But starting, 20, 21, 22, 23, this is something you can play around with. Again, we could put 2%, 1%. We could put 0% increase that year. We could put 4, 5, 6%. The positive negatives there, again, increase in cost, decrease in cost. The more we keep up, the sad part of this whole thing is, or the hard part of this really is, as you know, keeping up with the Joneses. As the county increases, the amount they pay, other cities increase or decrease, we're in that bubble, and that affects us. So if you don't keep up with the Joneses, we may have our best people going somewhere else. If we are a higher percentage of where everybody else is, we may be bringing in higher level talent from others. So these all decisions you make have impacts. Renewal and replacement I've also factored in there. These numbers I use from the adopted capital budget. So this is already in the capital budget, and this only shows what's actually budgeted. Remember, in the capital budget, there's kind of two levels, what we've funded and what we've not funded. So there's a sub-level here that I've not included. This is only the amount that we've included as funded in the next 5 years in capital. So you've got capital transfers, renewal, and replacement. There's a section here, you can take this down, you can increase it. The impacts there, of course, are higher expenditures, lower expenditures. You could borrow money. You could tax higher to increase this. And the other thing is pay me now, pay me later. These are kind of the impacts here. If you ignore your needs in capital infrastructure, you're going to pay for it later. If you pay for it now, hopefully that saves you a little bit of money in the future. So these are the type of things like with the blue, if you take that away, you're looking at if a car breaks down and we need another vehicle for police or fire, we may not have enough money to replace it. So now we're operating with one less vehicle. And the other is general capital. New programs. You can add programs, you can take away programs. For the baseline assumption, I have not added any new programs. I have not taken away any programs. I've just kept it as is, status quo. So this is what you're going to see. In just a minute, we're going to start playing with this. But before we do, I want to orient you to what you're going to see. The green line is revenues. The red line are expenditures. The yellow, or depending on what screen you're looking at, orange columns are the minimum unassigned fund balance policy. And then the blue or red are where the forecast puts you based on what you're spending or saving or not saving. So if it's red, this is really cool. I love this thing, and I just found this out, and actually Jane Davis helped me the other day, is it automatically changes. If it's negative, it turns red, and if it's blue, it's positive, and it's automatic when it changes. I know, I'm totally geeking out on that, but you'll see what I mean. It's really cool. So those are the four things we'll see.
Just make it blue, would you?
That's what we're going to try to do.
Whatever it takes to make it blue.
Yeah, that's what we're going to try to do. If anybody ever played when they were younger SimCity, this is kind of like the financial version of SimCity. It was a lot of fun. Well, for me anyway. Everybody else is like, oh my God, I can't believe you thought that was fun. So our goal, should you choose to accept it, is basically to, right now you have an imbalance. Anytime you've got that red line over the green line, you're in structural imbalance. You're spending more money than you're bringing in, right? And so while even though you've got blue all the way till the end, and the red is obviously bad, you want to make sure that the reason we've set our buffer at 30% or to 35% of expenditures is to make sure we've got enough money for when we have those hurricanes, for when we have those things. When you're below that level, you're in the danger zone of not being able to afford those things if they come along. So that's kind of how it starts out based on the assumptions. And then we're going to come back to this after we play with it for a couple of minutes and talk about some lessons learned. So this is the fun part. So here's the forecast. Now the cool thing about this is as soon as we change something, we're going to flip back here and you're going to see it change in real time. So these are all the assumptions we had talked about. Millage rate, fire service fee, general fund FTEs, change in overall salary, and capital. So now keep in mind as we're going to kind of work as a group. You want to shout out some things, talk as a group and say, yeah, do this, do that, do that. We'll plug some numbers in and we'll switch over and see what happens and you'll see it change. If you want to eliminate programs or add programs, we do that through FTEs. Generally, when in general fund, when you're talking about adding or deleting programs, most of the time it's going to be related to FTEs. Doesn't have to be, but that's kind of the way to change the numbers on this one. So I open the floor up to you to start, making some. And again, this is just. It will never be the same. It will change tomorrow. My assumptions could change tomorrow. This is just a tool to figure out the impacts that we make today based on what we know, how that affects the future. So this is not the end-all be-all. It's just a way to envision what happens in the future.
Are we going to work in pairs?
Alan, the FEMA reimbursement is not in here, correct?
It is in here.
It's already in
Yes,
there.
thank you for pointing that out. So if you see, there's some peaks and valleys in 17 and 18 at the very far left of your chart. At the very far left, you see the red line way above the green line. That's when a lot of our expenditures for the last two hurricanes occurred. I am assuming, and we're not going to get into accounting because I'm a budget guy, even though she'll say I'm not. If we got the money this year and we put it in this year's budget, this is kind of what I'm showing you. That's why you see the revenues way over the expenditures. I'm assuming we're going to get a lot of that money back this year. In 19, I'm assuming we're going to get about $3 million back from Irma. That's why the lines are still kind of right on top of each other. After that, the forecast that you see, those lines kind of end up parallel to each other and running along the same path. It's because based on the information that I just told you, we are looking at losing anywhere between, first year in 19, about $1 million a year to about $4.7 million a year going forward. So our job is to put those lines back on top of each other and maybe even cross over each other at some point to get some of that savings back and then get back to parity.
But Alan, wouldn't that? I'm looking at the fund balance and a question kind of related to Bob's comment earlier. When you're factoring that in, did you factor that $7 million as part of your expenditure for that year?
Which year?
Whenever last year, when you're putting together the balance.
For like the hurricane?
Yes.
Yes, that's why you see the expenditures in 17 way over the revenues.
All right, but that would also go into the average. My question is, my question is, take that out of it because that's not an every year expenditure. Plus, we get that money back. So to get because that's a high number that would skew that number.
So any one-time expenditures like that are not added into the base of what we think we're going to spend every year.
Okay.
What if I added 2 police officers a year, with the exception of 2020, because that's going to be a tough year?
So 2021 going forward?
Yeah, 2021. So by the end, I've added 8 more officers in a 5-year period.
So you go from 301 and then you start increasing 303, 305, and 307 in 2023. So we'll see. It's probably a small change, but watch your screen.
It'll be a small change.
Do you see it move just very slightly? So obviously the expenditures went up. We didn't change any revenue assumptions, and your decrease in fund balance went down just slightly.
That doesn't scare me as much as I thought it would.
Right.
Now, what if I added 4 firefighters every year because we wanted to add an ambulance.
Starting when?
There are no revenue projections, of course.
20.
Right.
Say 20, yeah.
How many?
4 total.
4.
I don't
Every
know
year?
if that'd be the exact,
5. And then just keep the same.
yeah.
307,
307, 309, 311.
309, 3011, but
Yep.
it's okay.
Well,
It's
yeah.
okay.
So the line, the red, now you see
We
here
went
in
in red a year
2022, we were blue before, and now we're red.
Mm-hmm.
So the lines between our revenues and expenditures are expanding.
What else you want to do, gentlemen?
I'm calculating, so we're talking about $1 million difference between the red line and the green line?
So in 19, it's about 1.9 million, and the other years, it's about 4.7 million a year. That's the gap that we see coming in the future. So we need to figure out how to close that gap.
In 20, you see where it starts to
2020.
level off in 20 and almost parallel the red line, but not, it doesn't. That's in excess of $4 million.
Here's one of the problems with your assumptions here. The assumption I have a problem with is the change to the, if the vote goes through reducing it, you know, and that's going to throw the whole question of millage into a interesting quandary, because we don't work just off millage, we work off the concept of rollback. And the rollback rate would automatically change with the reduction
Yes.
of 25,000, because the rollback is specified based on your
That would result in a different percentage of change, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be different in revenue.
Yeah, it
would
wouldn't change this. And actually, it's an interesting concept, because I remember way back when we had the Great Recession, the concept of
You remember that?
rollback. Yeah, I know. It's way a long time ago when I was a young lad. Rollback ended up being roll up, and in
It
this
was.
situation, it probably would be.
Mhm.
So that's going to have an interesting dilemma, how politically and socially that's dealt with.
Right.
And if you want to throw out a couple more scenarios with revenue or expenditures, we can go.
So just keeping all that the same with the additions that the mayor was throwing in there. What does this? Will this tell us at what millage we would need to go to just so that we could get back to
plug
the?
it in, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? What would that be?
Well, now, I think I had it in the back of my head what it was if I didn't change anything, but
5.2.
I think we're probably looking at
5.2, I think.
6, 7.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be a function of how much property values
Right.
Yeah,
accelerate.
I get that.
Yeah,
We can't.
that's only.
Yeah, we can't plug in all the.
But that,
Well, all that's already in here,
it's already in there. Yeah.
based on what's happened over the last 20
Right.
years in our change in taxable value, plus things we think are going to happen. So all that's already assumed, and it calculates, and I'll show you the kind of the meat of this after, but that's way too high, right? So now we're in 2023, we're raising way too much money, right? So we can go back and change it. Let's say we do 5. Let's just keep it at 5 and see what happens. So we're still not in balance, but it's not as bad as it was before. So let's say we do 6 and just stay at 6. And again, I am not saying that you should do this or that we do this.
Nope.
This is just showing you
I get
how
it.
that
How does the math
tool
work?
work. Yeah. So now you see
No
it
one
starts
from the
to.
press here. He's asking for a 6 millage rate. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that.
Wrong city for that.
But you see here how you change those things, and now your lines are starting to get closer. You're still in structural imbalance. You're still losing your savings, but you're not as bad off as you were before.
What is the main driver here?
The main driver really is
Good question.
whatever you change a variable, you see what happens.
Okay,
I'm
no,
not-
but in your model that you put on the board, clearly there's a main driver driving us, the green and the blue, to separate. I mean the green and the red.
Oh,
as
it's
personnel.
very simple. It's just that we are not bringing in the amount of revenues as to what we're spending. So what's happened,
Okay,
and this is
amount we're spending is increasing faster
than the amount we're saving.
revenue, and that's based on,
Well, actually, it's even if we did nothing and we go back to the way it was, you'll see that it's not so much increasing faster as it is paralleling itself. But, and I'll tell you why this is.
healthcare.
There are things that are increasing faster than revenue we're bringing in. There's healthcare. There may be CPI. All those
Well,
things.
it seems like cost of
salaries.
Seems like cost of projects that we've looked at over the last year and a half. By the time they come to fruition, they go out to bid, we get the numbers back. I mean,
30%
the cost
more.
of doing business is going up. The cost of healthcare is going up. CPI is going up.
Right.
Government does very well with the price of projects when the economy's bad.
Right.
And we do very poorly when the economy's good.
Well, that's absolutely. The private sector relies on government in tough times, but then when the going gets tough, the private sector will whip out those extra dollars to get that project, and we're as steady as she goes, folks, and they're ebbers and flowers.
To get back to your point, though, Councilman Ford, two things. One is, you see here this parallel line starting from 2020 to 2023. So our revenue and expenditures based on how we think our values are going to increase are kind of paralleling each other. It's not so bad.
I'm going to go to your math, by the way.
That's
There's
fine.
something wrong here. It's a little too extreme for the moderate suggestions you're making.
Disagree.
I'll be doing the math.
Okay. You're all going to get this, and you
Hey,
can go through.
I want to make something clear here. We're providing a tool for you all to look at and help us refine so we can all use it. We're not trying to sell you a bill of goods. So I just
You're not
wanna
telling me 6 mils, okay.
Because I ain't buying it.
No.
I think what he's Bob, I think what he's telling us is, regardless, forget the numbers. There's a problem on the horizon that's got to be addressed. That's
There
what I think
always
that's
is a
the
problem on the horizon.
right. But there's a bigger one now because of what's coming down the pike out of Tallahassee.
That's right.
And with the voters. So, but I think we can look at that reasonable and say that's going to pass. We're going to have
And
to
it's
face
going to be
that.
it's going to be a problem.
That's
but
right.
It can be dealt with simply by saying we'll go to rollback.
Oh, I don't know. Granted, that's for
And
another
this time it's
discussion,
going to be higher.
Yeah,
Right.
that's for another discussion. But
Yeah.
the point is there is a problem coming.
Right, and of course my assumption is not changing the millage rate. Yeah,
Sure.
if council, and that's where you see the difference between 19 and 20, that's why that gap suddenly exists, is you lose $1 million in value.
Right.
If we go to roll up, you're going to say it's going to be pretty much the same amount. Plus
All
or
of
minus
us
whatever.
remembering that the millage rate is only half the equation.
That's
People
right.
tell me, talk about their millage rate changing this, that, and if they look at their tax bill and their dollars are still the same or approximately the same, then it
Right.
really doesn't matter. I've never written a property tax check in mills. I've always written it in dollars.
So
The mills is only part of the equation.
The other item, and it may be as grim, is that the millage rate doesn't even pay for the police department. You know, so does the rest of our revenue stream keep up?
Yeah.
And that is hard. And
So the other way to look at that is, let's say, I don't know what the roll-up rate would be, but I know in 2020, if that passes, right now the numbers are we lose about $1 million in revenue, not value.
Right.
So another way to throw that in there is like, well, I've got fire service fee. I'm not suggesting, again, we supplement, but just to throw that number in there to make it even, as if we were going to go to roll up, we'll put the, is that $1 million? That's $10 million.
Put the million back in.
We'll do that.
You just found $10 million.
Yeah. So let's say
a little
we
under $3
somehow
a month.
supplement that revenue.
Okay.
And let's see what that looks like. So again, in 2023, we're red. We're still not as red as we were. So it's a little bit better, but we still have that gap. And I'll tell you where a lot of that's coming from also in the past. We've had recently relatively good times compared to where we were. We've built up a huge fund balance. We had a fund balance of between 30 and 35%. That's where we wanted to be. And we've used that for hurricanes, for capital expenditures. We don't borrow a lot of money, which is just a way that you can do business in government. You don't have to borrow. You can use that savings. And that's what those savings are for, is for those one-time costs. We bought land for $1.3 million or so. So every time we do that, if we keep on doing that, that's where we'll be. But keep in mind, that's not just those one-time things. Those are what we're planning on doing to pay for our capital, because we know that's coming down the pipe. So if we want to continue to be able to afford doing that capital, something's got to give somewhere. and we've got to be able to bring in the revenue that we're going to spend, or borrow, or raise millage rates, or cut programs, or whatever. So this is kind of the opportunity for everybody to kind of play with this and see how it shakes out. Now, just to give you an idea.
This also, while he's pulling this up, this also doesn't account for land that might be sold that the city still owns. We have a few pieces left. It's not gonna solve the problem, but
actually, I did include that in here. I assumed that we were gonna sell it back.
Got it?
Yeah.
All right. So there goes that.
Sorry. So just to show you the bones of this before we go back, this is literally every revenue line we have in the general fund, all the expenditures we have by department, a summary of those, the transfers. That actually, most of these are percentages based on a bunch of linked formulas that feeds into the dashboard, which feeds into the assumptions, which feeds into the charts. So it's pretty detailed. Could I have messed something up? Absolutely. There's a lot of room for human error here. But
I used to do these. Debugging them takes literally a month or two.
Yeah.
But
and I've been working on this for, I don't know,
a month or 4.
I would expect
You
that
definitely messed it up.
next
Too many
year
red lines on it.
that we would be back in a January workshop looking at this same tool, this same model a year from now, and we'll be able to examine what worked and what didn't, and this will be better next year.
yep.
And the year after that.
Well, this is a good exercise. We need
Absolutely.
to look out and see where we're going.
I believe that Vice Mayor Stiltner hit the nail on the head. We need to spend. There's 8 variables we can change. We need to manipulate them all somehow to come up with a more comfortable feeling that green line is approaching the red quicker than this current graph does. Adjust revenue, increase fees, increase millage, decrease staff, decrease level of service. There's either increases or decreases, and they all run contrary to what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So,
and there's all those variables that you talk about are all weighted differently as well.
Absolutely, and the assumptions that can all go to heck in a handbasket too. It's our best guess.
What I want to see is a year from now, if our confidence interval really was only 5%.
Right.
And it could be crazily different. Something might happen that throws all the assumptions off. And so I expect to use this as a living, breathing document. And I can save this as the baseline. Again, I'll send this to you so you can play with it at your leisure. Although, as I get new information from community development, as we have forecasts, as we get through half the year, as we see what will pass in the legislature or won't pass in the legislature, those things will filter out in this, and this will change, and it could change drastically. This is just based on the best information we have to date. And before we end, so based on all this, kind of the lessons that I guess I get out of this are here.
And how big of a how big of an investment does the business that Team Volusia is going to bring into Port Orange have to actually make in order for all that to be blue?
Huge.
Right? I mean, they're sitting right back there, right? I mean, we got to put them in the equation.
Well, to give you an example, the numbers that I got from community development, the value that's coming through, just to give you an example of how little you get from new development. So we expect to get about maybe $340,000 next year in new value. That's from $80 million
wow.
of taxable value. This is based on the current millage rate. Obviously, change the millage rate, those numbers change also. In FY20, we expect to get $500,000 of value. That's from $114 million of value. So you see here what drops off. I looked at the history of the percentage of revenue we lose from homestead exemption. So obviously that doesn't apply to commercial properties, but just to residential properties, it takes away 25% of your value like that.
Gotcha.
So to go to the end, kind of the lessons that I at least take from this, the deeper meaning. We have, as I talked about before, we have a structural imbalance in the general fund. When push comes to shove and all the hurricane stuff gets out of the way, we're spending more than we're taking in. And what does that mean? That means based on the decisions that are made from a political standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, in order, our job, Jake's job, that's why they pay him the big bucks, is to make the budget balance. We have to by law. And in order to do that, for every dollar that we lose in revenue, we have to decrease spending exponentially to be able to make those two meet. So it's not like if we cut $5 in revenue, we cut $5 in expenditures, we're good to go. We've got to make those two lines come together. So that's a harder job on us. Not saying we can't do it, but that's the job that we need to do. And as you saw there, we need significant changes to bring the fund back into balance. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be over time. That's the great thing about looking at this now. It's kind of like investing. If you go to your financial advisor, they're going to tell you the more money you invest now, the better you're going to be off in the future. So just like this, the dividends that we pay thinking about this now is going to pay off in the future. We might not have to make huge adjustments right now, this year or next year, but small incremental adjustments that we make over time will help us get back to where we need to be.
Did you put in here the pension reductions?
Pension reductions.
We're going to be 5 years out from now, or even earlier, we're going to be seeing significant reductions in the city's pension costs as our major investments over the last couple of years are finally beginning to, dig us out of that hole. So that's another one. There's so many variables. I mean, that's why this will take a long time. Because, I saw several $100,000 in reduced pension costs for the city going to be over the next couple of years, every year a little more, because of the investments the heavy investments we made over the last several.
And every time those come to fruition, those real numbers can get put in this thing and change it.
Just think if we hadn't the pension debt, what a glorious city this would be. We would have a large amount more discretionary spending.
And there's other options too that aren't in here, like fees and charges, and all those things feed into the general fund. So this is just a small snapshot of what you can do to play with it and see how it kicks out.
Okay. Good job.
Well, appreciate it.
I'll send it to you and you guys play with it.
Thank you.
That's good.
We have another tool or another toy. I don't know which it is, but we're going to find out.
Now, it was done on duty, so if a playhouse picks it up, the city gets a revenue.
Right. We'll charge for it.
Tracy Ream always gets around my no PowerPoint after 5 p.m. rule by using PDFs, but that's okay.
Exactly right.
You're in there 3 minutes early anyway, so.
Good evening, Tracy Ream, Finance Director. I'm pleased to bring you a report for the period ended December 31st, which is a quarter of the year. We are still in the process of closing fiscal 17. The auditors will be here February 5th. So as was the last time when we spoke, we still have some items to report in fiscal 17. But we're focused primarily on 18 right now. You'll notice here that we've received some money in. Last time we talked about this, we were lagging because of the timing of our ad valorem taxes. We now have 84% of the budget, which is in line with where we were at this time in 2017. Since we've been talking about the use of equity and the use of appropriated equity, this $5 million figure here includes the $1.649 million that was approved in the original budget, along with the land purchase, some additional carry forwards, and the encumbrance and project rolls. So that's how you get up to that $5 million figure that we're using in this year's budget. It was a substantial change from the last time that you looked at it. You also will notice here that we've at this point collected about $1 million more than we were at this time last year. If we look down here into the expenditure side, one of the largest changes is here in the non-departmental, which is the land purchase that was completed in the month of December. So overall, we've got revenue at 27%, which is that $1 million increase over last year. About 74% of that is the ad valorem piece. In the expenditure side of the house, we have expenditures up $1.8 million over last year, and 67% is the land purchase. So those are the big moving pieces in the general fund. So when you go to the bottom line here, you have this $5 million figure at this time. 2017 isn't a great comparison because, of course, we're still in the process of booking it and we have the hurricanes. But if we look at 2016, we can see that that's in the ballpark of where we would expect to be at this time of the year. So here we have the 109 Building Special Revenue Fund. Again, a more sporadic, much smaller fund. We have the revenue here that between this operating revenue and down here, this appropriated fund balance. Basically, we're looking at 25% of the total revenue. Operating revenue is 35%, however, which is better than the 2 prior years. Our expenditures are $315,000 here in the middle of the page, 18% of the budget, about $64,000 more than last year at this time. And so if we drop to the bottom line, we see that we have $128,000 of revenue over expenditures, significantly less than at this time last year, more than in 2016. Remembering, of course, that this time in 2017 we had the Westport, the sanctuary at Westport, that had bumped the fund up. In our water and sewer fund, we are looking at $4.884 million here. We've got 12 cycles in each of the years on our page here. It's a 6.1% per cycle growth over last year, so revenue is doing well. We've got expenditures.
Tracy, let me just ask you if you know the answer to this. That's 6.1%. How does that compare with the increase in number of customers?
Well, I kind of use a guide of the solid waste as an example. Now, solid waste has a little bit of variance in this particular month. Last month, excuse me, solid waste was up about 3%. So given that we haven't changed the rates there, it can be used as a proxy for a steady state or the growth piece of it. And we've got 6%. So it's looking like we've got about 3% in increased quantity and a 3% in usage variance.
You pulled that one out nicely.
I love to read these. This is like the most fun. I have a lot of fun, but I really like this part. So
that's the meaningful, and that's the meaningful numbers.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so our expenditures are about online. We've got just $3 million versus a 2.9 last year. And then we're looking down here. So at the bottom line, we're really quite steady at this time. If you look at that bottom line of between 835 and 854, it's the lost after transfer, so it's where we would expect to be at this point. If we go down to the solid waste fund. Now, in this particular month, of course, the solid waste fund had a little bump, but the 3% is good. And you see that bump here. I've got $1.2 million to $1.3 million. So about $100,000 increase in cost. We have a little bit of a lag here. There's a timing issue with one of our invoices that we're looking into. So you see that this the contractual services are about $100,000 less than I would anticipate them to be with last year. So that's leading here down to this profit. The combination of those two factors leading to this operating profit of $306,000. Also some savings in salaries, as you'll notice as well. So if we drop down to the bottom line on this fund, it's at $263,000 revenue over expenditures, significant improvement over either 2017 or 2016. And finally, our stormwater fund, again collected on the non-ad valorem method, so we see things coming in the beginning of the year. I'd like to point out, though, that this figure right here, this budgeted figure, does not include the resolution of reducing from the 120 to the 115. So that 75% can be a little misleading. It's actually 79 when you do the math on the revised figure. So it's a little bit lagging where we were for last year. Lags the general fund in general because we budget this at 97% versus 95% collection rate. So it makes it a little bit tougher to hit that target. As we go down, our expenditures are in line with what we would expect to see, about $23,000 less than this time last year. Non-operating also pretty much on target with what we would expect to see from last year, and that brings us down to a revenue over expenses of $2.6 million versus 2.2 at this time last year. So that is a quick overview. The golf course is still pending year-end entries, so I will be giving that to you. And the YMCA at this point had their fiscal year end close in December, so their statements are also not available at this time.
Okay, questions? Anybody? Just one thing of note. I appreciate your presentation of this.
Thank you.
I was taking a look at the ad valorem collection percentage versus the last 2 years. So that's the first thing I noticed, that we were. It seems like we're pretty much in line with collections, whereas in the last first couple of months we weren't.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the one thing that soothed my nerves a little bit. The other thing I wanted to know is, I know we're significantly below where we're supposed to be appropriated on reserves at 30% threshold as we await our FEMA reimbursements and wait and wait and wait.
Yes.
Where are we exactly? Or I should say approximately.
That's a very weighty question. There's significant emails going back and forth between us and FEMA on both of Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma. We are going to be booking the revenue for Hurricane Matthew to match the expenditures, the revenue to the expenditures. When we will actually see that, I'm not yet ready to guess. Yeah, our neighbors have begun to see some money coming in, so that's encouraging. Of course, their bills are substantially smaller than that of ours.
How are reserves at right now without all that factored in?
They're above the GFOA recommended amount.
Yeah, they just want us to have 2 months.
That's right, but it's still, if you looked at our bottom line of what we want and taking into account, it's a guess, but it's about 2.7 less than what we should have for the minimum that you all have set. So we've eaten up our reserves and then some.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anything else come before us this evening?
I have two comments just for your knowledge. First of all, Robin informed me today that our first and second reading of the budget at the end of the year fall on the same date as the school board and the county. So
you're going to send them a letter to make sure that they move their dates because of ours?
We are. So when that fails, my suggestion is we stay on track with those meetings and just have a special meeting either Monday or Wednesday and just hear the budget in its own special meeting and do it then.
I have a problem with that.
Okay.
And I understand that because of the competing interests. However, there are some people where they're simply going to come to that first and third meeting at a normal time as an expectation, because that's the way we've always done it. So I think we probably need to give that a little bit of thought before we do that.
So
if we have a special meeting on Monday or Wednesday so that we're not conflicting with the school board.
Right.
There are people that are going to show up like they do every year on that meeting on Tuesday.
That's why I'm saying have the normal meeting on Tuesday, so when they show up, we can say, you know, we're doing the budget, and I'm proposing on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we're having a regular meeting. You can come back tomorrow if you want to hear the budget. But if not, then we're just going to have a regular meeting on Wednesday, and the people that don't pay attention, we can't hear the budget on Tuesday. We can't. So we can either have a meeting on Tuesday, hear the budget on Wednesday, or have a full meeting on Wednesday and then hear the budget. So my proposal is to have a special meeting on Wednesday, and for those people that care about the budget and not the rest, they won't come on Tuesday, they'll show up on Wednesday. And we will make it, we'll do everything we can to make it very clear that first and second reading are on Wednesday, not Thursday.
Or whatever day.
Yeah.
And I would rather move out instead of move up.
And I concur. So, and we don't have to make that decision right now. I just wanted you all to know that conflict exists.
I can't believe the school board did that to us.
Yeah, and
I don't know who they think they are.
Exactly. Okay.
And there was one other rule, by the way, but I'll catch it in the weekly. I forget what it was.
Okay.
So
I threw you for a loop?
No.
Okay, good.
It was just some other neat thing.
With that, everybody?
Oh, I do know what it is. Oh!
What is it? Quick, I almost dropped it.
I'll talk to Bob Ford offline about it. We're good.
Okay. In that case, I'm hitting it quick. We're out. Have a good night.
All righty.